repeat myself, I repeat myself. I'm sorry. This is the part where I repeat myself, I repeat myself, I repeat myself. This is the part where I repeat myself, I repeat myself. Those things we said, those things we did, all piled up our heads. We swam below the river of it all. We floated so far from where we've been.
Real Talkers, greetings on this Wednesday. Ryan Jesperson here with you alongside our technical producer, Samuel G. Brooks.
Good morning, everyone.
Who is lacking. Sam, I usually compliment you, but you're lacking sympathy today, and I would ask that you wipe that grin off your face after seeing me smash my funny bone on the arm of the chair 5 seconds before the show started. I'm in agony, and I look over. You look over like it's the funniest thing you've ever seen in your entire life.
I mean, not the funniest thing I've seen in my entire life, but like I can relish in a little bit, knowing that you're okay. I can giggle a bit at you smashing your elbow into the chair before we go on.
Those are like the back in the day, like the the shows like America's Funniest Home Videos and that, and then that turned into that basically begat YouTube.
I would say so, yeah.
And then all the other spin-off shows, and those shows were always funny because you'd see something happen. Usually, I'm going to be just a little bit crass for a second, just to get to the point. I'm just going to be crude for a second to get to the point. Like 80% of those shows were dads getting hit in the nuts.
Absolutely.
That's what the whole show was.
Yeah.
With swing sets and T-balls and
rakes.
Yeah. Whatever. It was just guys getting hit in the crotch. And that always felt like the right protocol, what you just identified. Quick and immediate burst of laughter, followed by self-awareness, determination that the person is okay or will be okay, and then return to laughter.
Yeah, you double down on the laughter once you know that they're fine.
That's kind of the courteous way to revel in someone else's discomfort or pain.
I would say so, yeah.
But I'll tell you what, just in case anybody was really concerned, I'm already okay again,
okay,
everyone.
That's good.
I'm already okay. And I'm going to be, it's a good thing because I have this, I'm going to have to use this, I'm going to have to read through emails, I'm going to have to be moving papers around, so it's a very good thing that I've not sustained a serious
quite
injury.
A physical, strenuous job that you do.
There are people out there that think that they work hard,
yeah,
but they don't sit in a podcast studio for 2 hours a day and read emails. They don't know. Some of these people need to walk a mile in our shoes, Sam.
Your beautiful Fluvog shoes.
Yeah, well, there you go. Looking forward to today's show. How much? So we're going to learn a little bit on the show today. Coming up in about a half hour's time, we're going to check in with Elizabeth Howcroft, who's going to join us out of London, England. That's where she's based as a financial journalist for Reuters. How familiar are you with the story that she's about to tell us, Sam? How familiar are you with the trend that is these NFTs?
I am familiar with it as of 20 minutes ago when you sent me the article to read through and get some video ready. So this was completely off my radar up until now, and I'm really excited to learn about it. I also like how you tee up the show saying we're going to learn something today, as if we don't do that on every single show.
That's our mandate.
Yeah.
We demand of ourselves that we learn something each and every day. Otherwise, why are we here? And what's the point? You misspoke, I think, just not to put you on the spot and not to correct you, but you said you started learning about NFTs when I sent you something 20 minutes ago to capture an element for the show. And obviously that's a mistake because no reasonable host would send you elements 20 minutes before a broadcast and expect...
not one bit.
You must have meant...
I meant 20 minutes ago yesterday.
You must have meant yesterday because that would be ridiculous if somebody were to send you things within 20 minutes of the beginning of a live show when you're busy, you're turning on studio lights, engaging temperatures, and lining up. Can you explain to the people why when I walk in, you're clapping your hands and
I just
Sam's by himself here in the studio, just clapping his hands. Like
I just wanted to check Jespo's mic, and he wasn't here yet, so I turned it on, ran over to my desk, put the headphones on, and just clapped from my desk to make sure I could hear it through the line. It's a very scientific process.
It's a very scientific process. It's very complicated. Most of you would not understand. I mean, the technology, the approach that we take to this. So Sam is hard at work trying to get all these things done, and then all of a sudden it's like ding, ding, ding. You know, the highfalutin host that walks in seconds before we go to air, you know, when the car drops him off, pulls up to the front, you know, they get out, they open the door for me, right?
Yeah.
I have the Jeeves has the I asked him to iron the copy of the New York Times because there's nothing worse than a wrinkled newspaper.
Yeah.
So he
get out and shovel the walk in your path in case it's not like ready to go?
Because we did that. We got him that collapsible mat. It's like that red sort of a carpet mat thing that rolls out. So he gets out. He sort of does that. So it covers all the. So then I don't get my Fluvogs dirty, like you said. So I roll in. I've got my ironed New York Times. I've got my
that was flown in from New York for you this morning,
my
right?
half sweet, non-fat, 148 degree caramel macchiato, you know, ready to go. And I walk in here with moments to go, and there's Sam just clapping away. So it's going to be a great show. We're grateful to have you all here with us. If this is somebody's first time tuning in, they're like, somebody told me that this was a good and serious show, but I'm not. So if
you're a first time viewer, this is it. This is what you get.
Did all their guests cancel on them or something? Is there a reason why? Can somebody explain to us what's going on right now? Kim says Sam is obviously underpaid. Sam is this talk about you forming a union. That's a joke, right? I heard rumblings because we've intercepted Sam's emails.
Well, your management, so no comment.
Okay, no comment. Will the Real Talk team see a divisive union formed here in the? You know what's going to happen? We're going to start joking, and then people that are actually hardworking union members are going to be like, "Oh, what? You think unions are funny? You think this is a joke? Huh? You think talking about pay increases is some sort of a joke?" So, Greg's wondering whatever happened to Ask Jeeves. That was like the original Google, wasn't it?
Because I remember back in the day, there was jockeying for attention. There was like Yahoo was huge, and there was Ask Jeeves. Do you remember Dogpile?
No.
Dogpile was another search engine, and my favorite thing about Dogpile is the search button said fetch. So that's a dog-themed search engine.
That's fun.
Google swallowed them all up.
Why do you think? What was it? You have to wonder because when Ask Jeeves came out, it was like the hot new thing. People would say, "There's this website, and you just type." You just type it into and then you can ask it any question, and it just answers your question. It gets you the answer to the question.
Their whole hook was you could actually like write things as a question and give you an answer as an answer. I don't know. The early days of the internet was a fun time.
Yeah. The early days of the internet and the present day of the internet, still, I would imagine search engines are very helpful for law enforcement agencies, Revenue Canada, you know, people typing in like, you know, how do I launder money? How do I hide cash? I would imagine that a lot of the questions that are submitted to, I did a stand-up, it wasn't great and I didn't win, but I participated in a media stand-up comedy competition several years ago.
Is this the one that Connolly keeps winning?
Yeah, well, Connolly won the one that I participated in.
Yeah.
That's Mark Connolly, CBC, for anybody that's outside Alberta. I was robbed, obviously. Obviously, I was very funny. And I did a bit on, it's weird. No comedy clubs came calling after which was I don't know. I had my phone there. I kept checking to make sure it was where I had full bars. I had reception. There was no call coming through.
You didn't have a talent agent approach you on the floor?
It was strange.
Yeah.
I know it was very strange. But I did do a bit on, Jeff Dodsworth's listening in right now from Pritis, Alberta right now, and he's on his way into his. He says, "This is the best opening," and he simply sends me a photo of Jeeves opening up the door of the stretch. Looks to me to be an SUV limo that he's suggesting we might use with the red carpet, but I'm thrilled that Dodsworth is streaming us live on Mixlr right now on his way into work. Dodsworth drives himself. So maybe if you'd work a little harder, somebody would be driving him into work. Maybe we'll dangle that carrot. Maybe if he worked a little harder, somebody would be driving him into work. But I did a bit on stand-up. I did a bit on how I thought that parenting, you could have interventions on the people that shouldn't be parents. The conversations we always have, like, you should have to get a license to be a parent. You should have to get a permit to be a parent. And I often thought that child services could simply monitor Google searches to determine where an intervention was needed.
That's a good bit. I like that.
Because there's queries about things like poison control.
Yeah.
But you'd also get, can you feed your child candy for breakfast? You'd probably get, is it really that important to brush your kid's teeth if it's still the first set of teeth, the baby teeth?
You're going to lose them anyways.
All of these, exactly.
They're due for replacement.
You're going to lose them anyway. And wouldn't you rather get your adult teeth in, your permanent teeth, so to speak? Wouldn't you rather get them in as soon as possible?
That's how it works, right?
This is why I'm not in charge of the parenting in our house. It's why I'm not in charge. So to get back to the point, hey, to get serious for a second, first interview coming up in about 20 minutes. And we're going to get to a bunch of your emails today. We have some great takes on yesterday's show and the show before. And the more emails we read, the more emails we receive. So we're creating a bit of a problem for ourselves. It's a wonderful problem. But we might have to have a separate show that just reads emails every day.
Why don't we make that a Patreon exclusive?
That could be a Patreon. No, but see, Sam, here's the thing. It's more work for us.
That's true.
And I'm already stretched, like I said, here for 2 hours a day, and I'm just not sure. That sounds like a lot of work to me. It sounds like a lot of work. Okay, so she's going to come on, our first guest, Reuters financial journalist, as mentioned, and she's written this piece. Just was chatting with her, Elizabeth Howcroft, by the way, out of London, just a few minutes ago, and she's ready to go. This is a story out of October 2020. There's an art collector named Pablo Rodriguez-Fraile, and he spent $67,000 on a 10-second video. Do you have it locked and loaded? And have we determined, by the way, can we even show this? Are we allowed to show it? It belongs to this guy. If we credit him, it belongs to the point is, and I need to ask Elizabeth this, like, why is this thing worth now, like a year no, not even a year, in October 2020, like less than 6 months ago. Okay, here's this video, okay? It appears to be, former reality TV performer Donald Trump lying face down, defaced in a park, and sort of digitized people walking past while a bird lands on him. And is that how you describe it, Sam? Am I describing it okay?
I think you're describing it.
People listening on the podcast are going to want a vivid description of what we're talking about here. It's just a 10-second video loop. Now, in October of 2020, you may have thought that this art collector was a little off his rocker spending $67,000 for that. Well, guess what? Last week, like 5 months later, he sold it for $6.6 million. That is a $6.6 million video clip that we just showed you right here on Real Talk, your $6.6 million talk show. Now, it's authenticated by blockchain. Blockchain serves as the digital signature to certify who owns it and that it's the original work. It's a new type of digital asset known as a non-fungible token, an NFT. It's an item that only exists online. And I'm curious to see where Elizabeth will take this. She describes it as one of the most fascinating stories that she's ever told. But I'm hearing that this could get into things like hockey cards, music collectibles. This could be the new face of it.
Yeah, I think that it's, and I think that it's also just interesting, art is becoming more digital, or I shouldn't say it is becoming more digital because, classic forms of art are still thriving everywhere. But as digital artists come online and are pursuing their craft in an entirely virtual arena, there needs to be a way to authenticate and pay them and transfer these works. And
For sure.
I can kind of see this becoming a trend,
But if you want, if I'm spending $6.6 million, I'm considering it. I'm considering liquidating some. I'm considering, I 6 million here, 6 million there. We'll see.
Maybe you'll give Jeeves a day off in the week.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll buy him a painting. Maybe I'll buy you.
There you go.
Maybe I'll buy everybody a painting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But if I am going to spend $6.6 million on art, I would love. Now, this is where I'm old school, I guess, a little bit. And Ron McLean was talking about this, and Elliot Friedman. They were talking about this on what pro sports leagues are going to do. Because my understanding is that the NBA already has something like this going on, and of course, the leagues are going to want to get in on it because they're going to want to monitor. They want a piece of the pie, and this could be the new face of sports collectibles. And so Ron McLean's holding up his old vintage hockey cards, right, from the 50s and the 60s, and really great cards, Rocket Richard and Bobby Hull and all these old stars. And he's holding them in his hands, and part of me was kind of like, why are they not in protective plastic? Like, that was kind of where my mind was going. I digress. And Elliot's talking about how this is the new thing, these digital collector cards where you would own a highlight, for example, a LeBron James slam dunk.
Yeah.
It's like described as one of his greatest dunks of all time. The actual highlight, like the video clip, and I don't totally understand it. Actually, I barely understand it. Somebody owns the clip.
I think it's a way of just introducing scarcity into it. You know what I mean? Like highlight clips are everywhere, and leagues around the world have been kind of trying to clamp down on their assets and make sure that they protect their licensing rights with different broadcasters and blah, 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 blah. I mean, I guess the flip side to it is that, if you have this sort of attachment to a physical collector's item and what you get is a digital file, you can display it in however you want. I mean, if you have $6.5 million to spend, I'm pretty sure you could toss in a projector and projection map a room to display all of your art whenever you want.
Yeah. White Dream says it's already being used for sports cards, you guys. Greg just says, it says the NBA is huge into offering NFTs, and White Dream's right. And that's how this story first got on my radar. Then I saw this piece in Reuters, and I thought, we got to talk about this, if for no other reason that we want. Sam's looking. I'm just going to tell people what you're doing right now. You're telling me to open the show.
We this
is so
skipped
funny.
The intro.
No, we
once,
didn't skip it.
Literally because we were just chatting so much. So I'm just like, make sure we read the sponsor lead and start the show.
But once the intro starts, then the show officially starts. This is just people. This is like people just getting their coffee, people settling in.
Okay.
We're just. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. Oh yeah.
Blood pressure's coming down on this side of the room.
I'm still going to talk about Bitcoin well, and we're still going to hear Ayla Brooke and the Soundman again. You're going to hear that beautiful voice of the Real Talk voiceover artist. I don't mean to
the
brag,
announcer lady.
I don't mean to brag, but I slept with the announcer lady again last night. So you're going to hear that in just a second. Robin says, you guys, art investment is a tax shelter and a way to hide money. It actually has nothing to do with the actual works of art. Robin's right to a certain degree. It depends on what level you're at. I happen to know some people here in Edmonton, won't name names, but they have warehouses of art that is just categorized and stored, oftentimes in climate-controlled warehouses, and these are pieces that I would be too scared to hang them in my house. They're so beautiful and so valuable.
There's an incredible, it's either 1 or 2 episodes on Revisionist History, Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, where he talks about how, the vast majority of art collections in the world that are owned by giant institutional museums are literally just kept in warehouses. Most of it never sees the light of day, and they purchase it just to own it. And it just it's mind-blowing dissecting some of the stuff that, like I said, is just, it's hidden, it's in warehouses, it's in crates. Some of it they don't have written records of where everything is stored.
Amazing. I said, Straya says, to be actually serious for a second. Oh, all right. Says, to be actually serious for a second, brushing your kids' baby teeth is about helping them form that habit. Don't have to tell me. Wyatt and I get into a little something called Brushing Hero, the parents. Sam, you may enjoy it yourself. You load up the app called Brushing Hero. I'm not getting paid for this. This is just me sharing with you. And the app, it uses your camera on your phone, and it superimposes a knight's helmet on you.
Oh, that's cool.
And the more that you brush, and the more... Now, my concern, actually, not a dentist, but my concern is that it causes Wyatt to brush so vigorously because he's fighting monsters and dragons, and it's super exciting, and he gets points, he gets gold coins the more he brushes, but he starts brushing super hard. And my dentist has always been brush soft on the gums. Brush soft on the gums.
Is he slinging toothpaste all over the bathroom while he's doing? Yeah.
He's hammering down it. Someone's going to turn that into a GIF. What I just did. I better be careful. That someone's going to be Sam Brooks.
Yeah.
So anyway, Brushing Hero, I highly recommend it. This is also kind of funny. Les Landry is chiming in. He's on the chat this morning. Boy, did Les make an impression on Real Talkers yesterday. And by the way, Real Talkers who took Les's GoFundMe from, I didn't check in exactly, but
just shot that thing to the stratosphere. Holy
he came
man.
on, it was at $800, and then he sent me a note yesterday afternoon and said, hey, take a look at the GoFundMe. It was $3,500 or something. Yeah. So Real Talkers stepped up in a big way to fight poverty, which is great. And I saw a comment here. Where was it? I lost it. But someone on the live chat, something yesterday, we're doing what we can to address poverty. And Chris Sturwald here says, drummer, by the way, from Ayla Brook and the Soundmen, says, what is it? Yesterday we're fighting poverty, and here we are today talking about $6.5 million paintings. No kidding. Hey, Sam, did you know that this show is proudly presented each and every day, whether it's out of the gates or 20 minutes in, by our friends at Bitcoin Well? I was on a call last night with a buddy, and he's trying to make sense of crypto. He wants to do the right thing. He doesn't want to miss the bus, but then he also thinks, well, what if it's not right for me? And he says my dad thinks that I'm just out to lunch, even looking at this stuff, and I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know. I have some questions. I said, well, buddy, Bitcoin Well, the whole team's right there, ready to answer your questions. If you get to a point where it's right for you to invest in crypto, it's the easiest way to do it. The best thing about them is their personal relationships. As a matter of fact, I'm masking up and heading there tomorrow to get them to handle some business for me. That's the best part about this. When you're looking for answers, you'll find them at Bitcoin Well.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
All right. We're going to be talking, we'll get to the news headlines in about 10 minutes, and then we're going to be talking about these NFTs. This is fascinating stuff. We're also going to be talking to an Alberta pastor. As a matter of fact, out of Sherwood Park. He knows the pastoral team at Grace Life Church. This is the church that continues to be packed to the rafters week in and week out every single Sunday, plus through the week. They've got their prayer meetings on Tuesday. They gather on Friday, like hundreds and hundreds of people at 100% capacity of fire code. It's enraging a lot of people. Quite frankly, it's inspiring some people. You've got law enforcement tied up there every single Sunday. Reporters were counting 5 or 6 cop cruisers there last Sunday. That's 5 or 6 cop cruisers that aren't elsewhere doing their work. Pastor James Coates in jail. We're going to check in with a pastor out of Sherwood Park Alliance Church, Greg Hochhalter, who's going to talk to us about gathering in community and fellowship and his take on the assertions from the pastoral team at Grace Life that, well, churches that don't gather in person are being unfaithful. That was a hand grenade if I've ever seen one. Pastor Hochhalter joining us around, I guess, in about 45 minutes from now. And then Mike Cameron's going to check in. He's the author of Becoming a Better Man. Mike's dealt with tragedy, unimaginable tragedy in his life. His girlfriend was actually murdered by her former partner, who then took his own life. And Mike, to honor her, and I'll let him tell his story, I won't tell it to you, but Mike has basically dedicated his life to addressing this and has made huge commitments and is doing an unbelievable job. His book, Becoming a Better Man. Mike Cameron will join us in about an hour and 10 minutes from now. You know, people send us emails every single day. We get hundreds of them. We get easily more than 1,000 emails from Real Talkers each and every week, which is remarkable. And we're grateful for every one of them. And I wanted to get to some that we received here. This one from Michael yesterday after we talked to Les Landry. He says, I really appreciated listening to Les's conversation. Some of you would have seen Michael's comment in the live chat and not realized his background. I saw he did get pounced on a little bit for this. Michael followed up. He said, I posted a message in your live chat asking, what does Les think of people that are defrauding these support programs like AISH? If you're outside of Alberta, that's the Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped, and Alberta Works. I asked what he thinks of people defrauding these services, and he says, Michael says, viewers got all mad at me. He says, but here's the thing, I'm an insider. He says, I work in community and social services, and one of the biggest tasks that we have every day is dealing with people who report false information, clients that are working under the table, people that are living outside of the province still receiving supports through Alberta Works. He says, we have a program to attempt to claw these funds back, and I know that frontline workers get a bad view from clients, but Michael says, we see so much on a daily basis, we forget sometimes how clients are actually in need. In other words, it kind of impacts their perspective. He says we get yelled at, we get screamed at, we get pushed around physically so much that when somebody is in need, oftentimes, to be honest, says Michael, we may not actually see it. And he says, and it was refreshing to see a kind man like Les on your show. That from Michael. I really appreciate that. Can you call up that photo of Janice Irwin's office? If you're listening on the podcast, I'll describe it for you. Janice Irwin, a popular MLA out of Edmonton Highlands, Norwood, for the official opposition, the NDP. She was on the show a while ago. You remember that? Sort of going back and forth with Vitor Marciano, former Wild Rose senior advisor on healthcare premiums. It was a great conversation, that meet in the middle Monday that we had. Well, her office was vandalized with Antifa liars spray painted across her window, and Janice, as she does, responded in classy and magnificent fashion, wishing a good morning to everybody who continues to denounce racism and white supremacy. She says no matter how angry or uncomfortable it makes some people. Well, it prompted Alana to reach out, and Alana post that photo. She was grateful to see it on Real Talk, but she goes, how is this not like the top story on every social media feed? How is it not the top story on every local news platform? She says this vandalism is so much bigger than a can of spray paint and a few words. She says this is party politics BS. And the fact that it's not being loudly and immediately denounced by the premier and his government, she says, well, this is right up there with Donald Trump and his "We love you, you're very special" statement on January 6th. Alana says, I know we're living through a pandemic and physical distancing is essential, but how are the level-headed, rule-following, science-believing, anti-white supremacy Albertans not at the legislature grounds banging on the door demanding to be heard? She says our premier's been stoking the flames here with ultra-conservative values, and at an extreme white supremacy, the people should be furious. We should be livid. Alana says language matters, and the premier's language has been very coded to his far-right base for frankly years. She says Jason Kenney may not be holding the can of spray paint, but he sure has paint on his hands. That from Alana. She says, now, I know you could make the argument, Ryan, to not give these people a platform, not share this message, not boost its reach. But I would argue that the silence of the Alberta government on this speaks volumes. She says, quite frankly, all of the government's half-assed remarks of all the race-based incidents of the last few weeks, and there have been a number. Hijabi women being attacked in Edmonton. We've got tiki torches proudly being shown on display across the province. More rallies planned. She says this only leads Albertans to come to their own conclusions. This kind of ties into what Todd Babiak was talking about yesterday in branding Alberta.
Yeah, for sure.
Alana goes on to say, my conclusion is that being a racist comes across, quite frankly, as okay in the eyes of the governing party. Hate speech, hate-fueled violence seems to get a green light from the premier. Am I wrong in jumping to this conclusion, says Alana? She says, I'd love to be proven wrong. Says, I expect better of my leader. Regardless of party, platform, values, I expect my elected officials to be the first voice out in front of a camera for every single one of these events. I expect them to be loud and clear in their denouncement of this behavior. I expect investigations and charges, and I expect my elected leaders to be trash talk, spitting mad about this. Nice reference, Alana. Says the fact that Premier's not out in front of this event or the attacks on hijabi women or the white supremacist protests with the tiki torches says to me that he's okay with this, that he agrees with it, that he even endorses it. Alana says, sincerely, raging fucking mad. That from Alana. Appreciate that. I bet some people will say, you really think that politicians, you think politicians aren't, but you really think politicians have to get up and get in front of microphones and comment on every single one of these? You honestly think that every single incident requires a comment from the premier or from the government or from MLAs or mayors every single time? Every single time you think they need to comment on it? You know what it reminds me? It reminds me every single time that there's a horrific act of terror, of violence perpetrated by, in particular, extremists or followers or those that would interpret the Muslim faith in an extreme sense. Extremists, terrorists, we'll call them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's I'm going to invoke Amarjeet Sohi when we had him on last week, chatting with Paula Simons, how he said, it concerns me because it's a trend.
But here's the thing. People will reach out and say, I didn't hear from the National Council of Canadian Muslims on this. Do they condone it? Do they endorse it? I didn't hear from the folks at Al Rashid Mosque about this. Not a comment. Where's the comment? And you might sit there and say, you expect, you want local mosques or Muslim leaders to comment on every single act of terror? Well, if that is the expectation, then we should expect the same across the board.
Absolutely.
Regardless of scenario, politics, creed, religion, right? I mean, if that's the expectation, then that should be the expectation. I think in positions of political leadership, I think Alana's bang on with that. I think her expectation's fair. And I love this one from Alexia. Alexia wrote in to say, this is encouraging. You know what jumped out at me on this email, Sam? I bet you saw it too in your inbox. The subject line said, future Albertan. I went right on.
Oh, yes. I loved this email.
She says, I just tuned in to today's show from Ontario. Thank you, Alexia, and good morning to our friends in Ontario. Says Todd Babiak's thoughts on why we are drawn to Alberta encapsulated everything I've been feeling and thinking since last October when I visited your province and fell in love with the people and fell in love with the place. I say your province, Ryan, but soon I will also be an Albertan. I'm planning to pack up my car and head there with not even a job lined up. My fingers are crossed. The budget was just tabled there, and it seems like I'm headed for ground zero. My friends and family in Toronto think I'm nuts, especially considering all the opportunity, in quotes, that exists in Ontario's diversified economy. But like Todd Babiak said, there's a romantic element to why we find ourselves where we are or where we want to be. I know I'm taking a risk by moving west, but I'm taking even more of a risk by remaining stagnant. Living near the Canadian Rockies is worth whatever risk there may be. Being part of the new chapter being written in Alberta is worth the risk. Having hope for a new beginning is worth the risk. And hearing all of this echoed in your interview with Todd Babiak confirmed to me that I am making the right decision. Wish me luck and see you soon. That from Alexia. How great is that? That made my day.
Welcome to Alberta, Alexia.
Welcome to Alberta. I extended. We'll roll out the red carpet, not our red carpet.
No,
because that's fine.
You keep that to yourself.
That's very expensive. It's fine fabric. We can't have everybody walking all over this red carpet. But the red carpet I used to use, we'll roll it out for Alexia when she arrives.
That spare one that's rolled up in your garage, that one? Yeah.
We don't want to chase her away. We better stop with this malarkey, as President Biden would say. Hey, it's just a couple of days until Friesen Brothers opens the doors on their 15th Alberta location. That's right here in the capital city, just off the Anthony Henday at Rabbit Hill Road. It's going to blow your mind. I was there earlier this week, got a bit of a sneak peek. It's like, all I can say is when you walk in, you're going to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to reveal all the secrets, but they got a smash burger station, craft beer. Every time I talk, I look at Sam and I say they got craft beer taps. Yeah, like phenomenal.
And smash burgers and a smoker and fresh sourdough.
Smokers, fresh sour. You know what the best part about it was? They had their sandwich team, like you do sandwiches made to order. They had the team doing the training when I was walking through. And so they're like
samples, didn't you?
And they were like, Jespo. I was like, what's up, guys? They're like, you want a sandwich? I was like, what do you think? I said, what's the house recommendation? He says, Montreal smoked turkey. I said, well, hook me up. And they did. And it blew my mind. Friesen Brothers, for more than 60 years, Alberta grown, Alberta owned. As is the team, proudly based out of Alberta for more than 40 years at Westworld Computers. Had a note from a Real Talker yesterday that said, what was that deal? They said, where do you get all the, where you're talking about all the refurbished gear? They're looking to upgrade their equipment, but they don't have the budget, as a lot of people don't right now. It's been a tough year. It's been a hell of a year. You don't have a budget for all new gear at Westworld, from the Apple Watches and the iPhones all the way up to the MacBook Pros and the iMacs and everything else. They've got the gently used stuff. Software is reloaded. They're re-warranted. They got you covered, no matter your budget, at Westworld Computers. Let's take a look at what's making headlines. Every day we've got a new update for you on the vaccine front, an expert panel that's advising governments in the United States and Canada on vaccines, determining that the second doses of COVID-19 can be given up to 4 months after the first. Now, there's implications for BC and Alberta here. This is the National Advisory Committee on Immunization. The supported extending this interval to no more than 6 weeks. You know, people need these 2 shots, right? And they thought that maybe this would open the door if they could stretch it for more people to get their first shots while supplies are still limited. And so they're not recommending an interval of more than 4 months between shots. But in BC, Bonnie Henry, their provincial health officer, says that they're going to move forward. Alberta's Health Minister Tyler Shandro says Alberta also considering stretching the wait time between doses. Currently, Alberta administers the second doses within 42 days, within 6 weeks of the first dose. The health minister saying that Alberta's getting advice comparable to BC. quote, we've received from physicians and our provincial vaccine advisory committee advice made up physicians, public health folks. We are considering what BC has done. And how about this? Tomorrow, March 4th, information provided by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security warns of extreme chatter on these message boards they're keeping an eye on. They say it's increasing, including members of this 3%ers extremist group discussing possible plots against the Capitol tomorrow on March 4th. Law enforcement confirming that security will be increased. Acting House Sergeant at Arms at the Capitol, Timothy Blodgett, telling members in a memo, this is reported by CNN, that while they are enhancing security out of precaution, they have no indication that groups will travel to Washington, D.C. to protest or commit acts of violence. Now, why March 4th? Well, QAnon conspiracy theorists believe that former President Trump will be inaugurated tomorrow on March 4th, returning him to the presidency. Why? Between 1793 and 1933, inauguration often fell on March 4th, or a date close to that. Sam, you look like you're trying to take the story seriously.
I think trying to take this story seriously is exactly... the extremist threat should be taken seriously.
That's the part I'm feeling. Is like there's no laughing matter about what happened January 6th.
We've seen this happen already, but at the same time, like, I don't know, QAnon stuff just makes me eye roll. Yep.
We're working. I love when you end your take. Yup. We're working on a conversation. We're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. We've got a great segment coming up either later this week or into early next week. We're working on lining up the author. I don't want to jinx it. She's based out of Paris, and so there are some things that we're working on details-wise, but we will be focusing on conspiracy theories in days to come. I should announce quickly, I got ahead of myself, and I announced that our solar panel would be convening this Friday for the traditional Friday Real Talk Roundtable from 9 to 10 Mountain Time, 11 to noon Eastern. Turns out that there's one guest that we really, really, really want on that panel. They're unavailable, unfortunately, on Friday, so we're going to bump it to next Friday. So I wanted to let Real Talkers know next Friday, that'll be, I think, what is that, the 5th? So it'll be the 12th of March, will be our solar panel, where you'll never guess what we're going to be talking about. Looking forward to it. Green energy. I think it's going to be a great conversation, so that's coming up. Let's get into this fascinating story. Okay, so Elizabeth Howcroft does a great job, a financial journalist at Reuters, based out of London. She's going to be joining us in a few moments. She reports on global financial markets, and we're going to be talking about the trend of these NFTs. It's been really interesting to see Real Talkers chiming in. Many of you have a much greater understanding of this than we do on these digital assets, these digital art assets. Where are people buying them? Where is this going to go? How does blockchain fit into it? I think that this is going to be a great conversation. Also wanted to get to some more of your emails here, though, and some of them are really, really, you tie into stuff that we realize as we have these conversations that oftentimes it takes, hours or even days or weeks for us to digest what we're getting into. And I wanted to read this email. This is a great one from Barbara. And Barbara touches in on words and the words we use and the power of words. And you remember that I had read an email a few days ago from a listener. And she wrote in to say, Ryan, you're using this phrase or you're using this word. And inadvertently, she says, I'm sure it must be inadvertent, but, you're offending members of the community of people living with disabilities, and you're sort of denigrating them. And it was actually I thought, relatively speaking, a pretty kind-hearted and well-meaning email. It was great, and it led to a great conversation. And we had the two Adams write in emails yesterday on it, and this one from Barbara I wanted to get into. She says sometimes I catch the shows a little bit later on the podcast. Barbara, thank you. She says, I really did enjoy the frank, open, and honest conversation on the use of words like spaz. She says, I have noticed you use it in past, Ryan, I have. And to be honest, I didn't make the connection myself that sparked the comments that you read, but I do agree with the viewer. For me, I found it to be a term that was used by younger people, and as an adult, it's a term that I've grown away from. But that doesn't mean that I've grown away from all of my youthful words and language. Sometimes my kids will give me a bit of a look. And she says, another reason for my lack of attention to your use of that word or the phrase is I like you. So it kind of slides off, says Barbara. She says, your other listener also clearly likes you and cares enough about you to share her thoughts and provide a good reason to not use words like that. And I'm so happy that you opened this up as a topic for discussion, because I'm so disheartened by people that will latch on to something like this and say, oh, here we go. Here we go again. More of the politically correct police or the political speech police. But the reality is, says Barbara, and I can assure you that she's not the only person who feels or thinks that way. Says, I'm glad she put herself out there and felt safe enough to say something and to do so respectfully. Barbara says, I know that you probably agree with me on all this, Ryan. I'm just expressing my gratitude for her. And Barbara, I do agree. She says, something I learned some time ago, and that is that if one person makes a statement, it's often said that up to 1,000 other people might be thinking the same thing. She says, I remember a number of years ago when recycling was becoming more than just an idea. And I saw a TV commercial with like food. There was food. You could just put it in a bag and then you could like boil it or throw it in the microwave, empty the bowl, toss the bag in the garbage. And Barbara says, maybe I was in a bit of a feisty mood that day, but I wrote to the company asking how they could in good conscience market tossing plastic in the garbage and not showing recycling as an option. And she says, and I'm sure I wasn't alone in noticing this because I never saw that commercial again. Now that I have better knowledge about recycling, I realize the package should be cleaned first, another step to impede the convenience of the product. But my point is, I felt like my words on that topic mattered. Barbara says, we've all grown up using words that are so comfortable to us, not realizing that there's a quiet audience where we go that's possibly hurting. Changing our words has, in my opinion, nothing to do with being politically correct, but everything to do with respecting individuals who have a different understanding of or response to words because of the impact it has on them. While many believe it's a burden, tagging political correctness as a bad thing, I think it's great. And I think we're evolving into better people who care about others as we make these small tweaks with our words and our thoughts. This is great. She says, I feel very strongly that you're okay with making a change based on sensitivity of messages you receive, and I appreciate you being able to use yourself as an example when garnering feedback from your audience. She goes on to say, I've enjoyed many of your interviews, and I've ordered several books from authors I've heard on the show. She says, I'm so happy to have Real Talk to tune into every day. That from Barbara. What an amazing email. I totally appreciate that, Barbara. Thanks very much. Is Elizabeth ready to rock and roll from London? I'm so jazzed that she's agreed to take the time to talk to us here. Elizabeth reports on global financial markets, and she covered a story that I haven't been able to stop thinking about from the moment that I saw it at Reuters.com, how a 10-second video clip sold for $6.6 million. Elizabeth, welcome to Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I suppose we're getting into your late afternoon. We're getting into your evening, so it means even that much more. How much did you know about NFTs before? And I'm going to say full disclosure, I am at a very, very entry level of understanding on all this stuff. How much did you know about NFTs before you started digging into this story about Pablo Rodriguez-Fraile?
I didn't know anything about NFTs at all before I came across them in researching and decided that it was worth writing about them.
Okay, perfect. So you're a professional storyteller. So why don't I ask you, in your best layperson's language, how would you lay the groundwork for our conversation when we're talking about NFTs? We're talking, is it non-fungible token? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess the first thing to do is to explain what an NFT is. So an NFT, as you say, stands for non-fungible token. And it's basically a kind of digital asset that's key features that it's backed up by blockchain in a way where blockchain verifies who the owner is and that each one is unique. So unlike your average sort of object online, which could be copied and pasted or reproduced, these ones have a sort of verification system that makes it publicly known who the owner is and what the original NFT is.
And the point of this, I mean, obviously, for example, for the art collector that you feature in this piece, the point could very well be 10 times 100 times return on your investment in the course of several months. So there's that point. Is the other point from a collector's standpoint exclusivity? Is that it? Owning something that nobody else has? Is that the idea?
I think that's definitely part of it. So yeah, we had in the story this example of an art collector investing in an NFT in the form of digital art. But the market is really varied, and some NFTs are more like collectible items. So the sort of people who are buying them are hobbyists and collectors who want to buy things to do with their passion. And yeah, definitely the selling point is the idea that they will have the public status of being the only owner of that item.
So how did this art story get on your radar? Were you following it back in October of 2020 when this man spent $67,000 on this 10-second video clip? Is that when you first started paying attention?
No, I wasn't actually following the story as far back as that. And in fact, I'd been looking into NFTs as a whole for a while, and already had a draft story written when I came across the example of this video clip that went for 6.6 million. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, that's the headline. That's what we'll lead with.
It's unbelievable. So this video, and we're seeing it here, it's by the digital artist Beeple, whose real name is Mike Winkleman. And here's where I get a bit out of my depth, to be honest with you. I'm referencing your great reporting here at Reuters.com. It's authenticated by blockchain, which essentially serves, as you write, as the digital signature to certify who owns it and that it's the original work. It's this digital asset. I mean, the obvious thing for me is I'm looking at this and I'm going, it's cool. It looks neat. But here we are, we're watching it and we don't own it. And I think if I'm going to spend $6 million on a painting or a piece of art, I'd love to hang it on the wall. Do we have to totally rethink our entire understanding of enjoying art or enjoying sports or hockey? People are saying this is where sports cards could go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not for me to make a judgment on how much impact this market will have, but it's certainly the case that enthusiasts, people who are massive fans of this idea, think that this does represent the future of ownership. They're looking at the amount of time we spend online and thinking, well, if you want to splash out on something, why would you buy something like, say, a gold watch that none of your friends will see, that you're just going to wear behind your computer, when you could buy an item that will exist in your online life and that your online friends can see, and it will sort of enrich your life within the internet and the online worlds you inhabit. So certainly there are enthusiasts who really think this is the future of ownership, and this is how people will have assets in the future.
And if that's the case, then getting in early, as is often the case with new trends and investments, will be key. Where else are you seeing this play out? I mean, the sports world is one great example, but it goes way beyond that. I would imagine even if we use our imagination as best we can, we'd probably only be scratching the surface right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons this was a really interesting story to report, because it really does just set your imagination going. So yeah, you mentioned sports cards and collectibles. There's a site called NBA Top Shot, which we mentioned in the piece, where people can trade video highlights of particular key moments in basketball games. So that's one area. Another area that people are buying NFTs in is patches of land within virtual world environments. And that's a really interesting one because people think that as we sort of head towards, at least some people believe we're heading towards a world where we'll increasingly spend our time in sort of virtual environments, maybe even facilitated by virtual reality. The idea that you could own maybe a patch of land within that's backed up by an NFT is very appealing to some people.
This is fascinating stuff. I mean, your report at Reuters, it kind of, this is a compliment. It dumbs it down enough that I'm able to start to understand it, but I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how investing in land in a virtual environment would make sense, but that's because that's not our go-to thing yet, right? But if you were talking to people about staking out claims, for example, the value, and you look at companies, if you owned Nike.com or Apple.com, and wanted to negotiate with a company to sell that as an example of placeholding something, those would be worth millions of dollars right now. That's maybe the best example I can come up with right now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And in fact, one of the things that people are buying as NFTs are cryptocurrency wallet address names. So that's almost exactly parallel to the sort of scramble for domain names that there was in the early days of the internet.
Have you been able to look into whether or not this is the type of landscape where fraudsters can run rampant? I think oftentimes when there's environments where people barely understand what they're doing, there are those that have a great deal of understanding that are capitalizing on that. Have you been looking into it?
So I wouldn't want to go too far beyond the scope of what I have looked into, and I'm by no means an expert. But it's certainly true to say that any market where there's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, and a lot of speculative investment, will also come with warnings that there are risks, not least of people putting a lot of money into something that maybe they don't understand too well.
Have you, through the course of your journalistic exercise, have you been kicking around and starting to flirt with the idea of maybe getting in on this yourself? I mean, do you ever consider crossing that bridge where you go, this is a train I don't want to miss?
No, I wasn't tempted, to be honest, not least because, it's very important to stay objective on things. And I think if I had a financial stake in it, then, that wouldn't be quite right for Reuters.
Yeah, you start writing about how you think it's the new trend and everybody should get in on it, and then your personal assets start to rise. There may be a bit of a conflict there. Have you spent any time looking into OpenSea? This is the I only know this because of you wrote your report. This marketplace for NFTs. Have you spent any time kicking around on there?
Yeah, I mean, I had a look at the marketplace, and that's really where I learned about the different kind of NFTs that exist. Yeah, I mean, OpenSea has seen incredible growth. So yeah, for your listeners, this is a kind of marketplace for buying and selling, trading NFTs of all different sorts. And a year ago, they were seeing monthly sales volume of around $1.5 million. And then it started to pick up over the autumn of last year. By January, it went up to $8 million in monthly sales, which was quite a step up. And that was the sort of time that I started looking into it. From 8 million in January, it then went to around 90 million in February. So it really just exploded the amount of interest and sales and transactions that were going on.
Fascinating stuff. How much of your work centers around studying crypto? Are you paying keen attention to that trend as well? Is that factoring into a lot of your journalism these days?
Well, I'm not specifically a crypto reporter. We have some amazing crypto reporters on our team, but it's not specifically my beat. But certainly anyone who's a markets or financial journalist at the moment can't not notice what's going on there.
Yeah. Is there a trend within crypto that you're keeping a keen eye on? I mean, I guess I'm asking you to give us some insight into your journalistic process and give us a hint on what you might be writing about next. But is there something, a particular storyline you're keeping an eye on?
It's probably not my place to call what the next trends or stories are in that area. But I'd certainly say watch out for everything Reuters writes, because it's, always the most reliable and accurate and interesting articles.
Yeah, love it. Great plug to wrap it up. Elizabeth, I'm really grateful that you've made the time to talk to us. And you're absolutely right. Reuters' reputation is bulletproof around the world. It's why we were really grateful that you took the time to check in from England this morning. Thanks for joining us here on Real Talk. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you got it. You can read Elizabeth Howcroft's great piece again at Reuters.com. Here it is. I'm just taking a look at it right now. I'll show it to you, Sam. This is how a 10-second video clip sold for $6.6 million. A fascinating story. And talk about turnaround, like really quick turnaround on an investment. This guy purchases this 10-second video clip in October for $67,000, which is a ton of dough, and then flips it for $6.5 million 5 months later.
I'm curious if hello, there we go. I'm curious if the how much do you think the subject matter matters on this one? Like, do you think it would be worth the same amount if Trump had won the election and we're back to sort of, like the last 4 years again, or it's because it is this kind of satirical art piece critiquing the former reality show star that used to inhabit the White House? Do you think that has a big effect on the price of this? I can't even answer your questions. I don't even want to answer your questions because I don't know enough to have an opinion on this. I'm fascinated by it. I'm trying to keep up. I mean, this is not going to turn into another plug for Bitcoin, except for the fact that like the biggest reason why I think
the service they provide is so great because there's no dumb question. You can come and say, you can walk in or you can call them, send them an email and say, like, I literally don't understand anything about this. I don't understand what blockchain is. I don't understand what a hardware wallet is. I don't understand, I've got one here. Hang on a second. So I've got this thing, and I'm just figuring out how to use it, right? And it's somewhere in my bag. Anyway, but it's like
It's good radio.
I'm still figuring out like how this even works and what it even is, and it just looks like a USB stick, right? If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see it right now. It just looks like a USB stick, right? Now, there's not actual. It's got this cool little digital readout on it and everything. Now, my understanding is it's not actually like there's not Bitcoin stored on this. But this is the key that allows me to access the Bitcoin that's on the blockchain, right? Kinda? Did I kind of? So this is.
I think so.
So experts right now, even people that are watching right now, people that are listening to the podcast later are going to go, Jesperson, you should not be. You don't even know what you're talking about, and you're right. But all I'm trying to do is keep up and understand, because if this is the next big thing, and a lot of people think it is. As we see markets go wild, and as we see Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve in the States and Canadian Mint and governments just print money, print like billions, trillions of dollars. Inflation's a thing. Banks, I think, underserve people in a lot of different ways. More and more people are getting into this, and I think we're just scratching the surface of it. And so to get back to your question about these NFTs and the ownership of these assets, I think that some people are going to want to get in the game just to be in the game, like just to feel like they're part of the movement.
Yeah, I think what we see with a lot of trends is like I'm betting, like with crypto, there's going to be some people that are like kind of early adopters to any technology. They're just sort of like, I need my hands on some of this. It could be something valuable. It could be a total flop. But like, there's people like our friends from Bitcoin, like our friend Adam O'Brien that you describe as a futurist that is just sort of in this space of, if there's a new trend, I need to be up on it. I need to understand which direction the world is moving in. Yeah. This particular piece, it almost feels like a digital Banksy to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it kind of has that, like, both in the subject matter, the spontaneity of it, the fact that it's this social critique.
But you know that Banksy will find a way to Banksy NFTs.
Absolutely, he will. Or she will. We don't know who Banksy is.
We don't know who Banksy is. But a brilliant, whoever it is, absolutely brilliant. I'm taking a look. Some random guy says, never, ever lose that digital wallet, Ryan. True. But if you do lose the digital wallet, then you've got this list of words, these random words. Let me read you my list. No, I'm just kidding. But the list of words is what you can't lose. It's like 25 random words that you are assigned, like totally random words, like, painting, headphone, candle, genius, all these words. And if you lose your digital wallet, you can get a new digital wallet. Like it's just like a cheap piece of whatever it is. Plastic or whatever, you plug it in, then you punch in all the words, then you restore access to your blockchain. If you lose your digital wallet and your words, you're screwed. And we've heard nightmare stories like this of people that are missing millions of dollars worth of crypto because whatever happened with an old hard drive, or they lost access to it, or they can't. I mean, these are nightmare stories of people. You're hearing more and more stories of people that are saying, I spent $1,000 on Bitcoin when it was like pennies. Because I just wanted to get in. I didn't know what it was. I forgot I had it. All of a sudden, I realized Bitcoin's at like 50 or 60 grand. Oh my gosh, I have millions and I can't remember how to access it. And these are the stories you just go, oh. We asked Adam O'Brien about that, CEO of Bitcoin Well, a while back. He'll be back on the show. Joanne and others are talking about how this could be a huge opportunity for artists. Like Abreka says, I love this. It's like ownership with the intent of sharing, as opposed to ownership with the purpose of withholding. And the implications for art are outstanding. Joanne says this could really help artists make a living on their art and receive some amazing exposure. It's kind of like, in a way, it's like a digital Etsy in a way. Like I'm looking here, but I'm looking on the website here, Sam, at OpenSea.io, and look at this. Like this is a serious question. I feel really silly asking this, but you see these Bitcoin high tops that are for sale. Like, is this even? I'm asking a serious question. Is it the picture, or do you get actual shoes?
I think
It's gotta be-
just the picture.
It's just the
It's just
picture.
art. Yeah.
That's the point, right? Like, you don't get the actual shoes.
I think you can take those shoes to whatever sneaker manufacturer you like, and
I'm
they
sure
can
you
probably make
could.
them for you. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. All right, let's focus. We're going to be talking about this Grace Life Church in just a moment. The church that is defying public health orders each and every Sunday, packing the church to the rafters. Police are there. RCMP have been there the last number of Sundays in a row. Pastor sitting in jail because he refuses to comply with the order to basically respect public health guidelines. 15% of their congregation. He says, I'm not going to do it. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Right now, I wanted to remind you that the team at Grand Dog Essentials wants you to know that your dog right now may be, well, you may be not getting the most out of the meals you're feeding your dog, and it could have real impacts on your dog's health. That's why they've introduced these 3 new supplements. Now, these products are for all dogs, whether you're feeding raw or kibble. They've got a daily probiotic for healthy dogs that'll protect their immune system. They've got digestive enzymes for dogs that have a hard time digesting their food. And then they've got this green-lipped muscle oil. They say move over fish oil. There's a new kid in town. This is this muscle oil free of heavy metals and toxins, loaded with the immune-boosting omega-3. Really good for joint health, the anti-inflammatory angle of this. If you have an older dog like we do, that's a real consideration. You can find them online. The Grand Dog team loves to talk about what they do. They love to find a perfect solution for you. Oh, yeah, and by the way, they deliver right to your door. All you need to do is check them out. All their social media, their Instagram's great. You can check them out online, and make sure you use the promo code REALTALK. If you use the promo code REALTALK at granddog.ca, they're going to give you 10% off your first-time order, which is a great opportunity there. The team at Kubi Energy, in addition to providing our positive reflections each and every Monday, also they're providing electricity, natural gas, and internet to Albertans. They've been doing so while supporting nonprofits the entire time. Now, you're going to pay somebody for your natural gas. You're going to pay somebody for your internet, your electricity. Why not make it a builder of Real Talk at parkpower.ca? That's going to give you $70. Put $70 back in your pocket, too. That's a pretty great deal. If you go right now and sign up, your first bill, whether it's residential or commercial, is going to have $70 taken right off the top if you use the promo code 2021-REALTALK at parkpower.ca. I'm grateful that our next guest has agreed to join us. He is the lead pastor at Sherwood Park Alliance Church. He's been there for more than a decade. Also serves the community as a volunteer chaplain for Strathcona County Emergency Services. That's the Strathcona Fire Department. Married with 2 grown kids, one in Montreal, one in Dublin, Ireland. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Pastor Greg Hochhalter. Pastor, thanks for being here today.
You're welcome, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. This Grace Life Church, not your church, I want to be very clear, has been featured, let me say, in news coverage of the past number of weeks as hundreds and hundreds of people continue to attend, defying public health orders. This is in your neck of the woods, and I would imagine you probably know a lot of people at that church, including the pastoral team. How have you been processing what you've been seeing?
Well, first of all, actually, it's not really in our neck of the woods. We're in Sherwood Park, so we're east, and Grace Life is west. So
but you're within 45 minutes of you're same ballpark.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. But no, I'm not familiar. I don't. I have a lot of colleagues around various churches throughout the province, throughout Western Canada, but I'm not personally acquainted with any of the folks at Grace Life.
Okay. How have you been processing what you've been seeing?
Well, I probably am processing less about Grace Life and more just about, in general, how churches should be reacting to the public health restrictions and the pandemic itself. And again, I would really rather just talk about how we've adapted as opposed to being too critical of others. But I can offer maybe a little bit of a contrast and conviction in terms of what's been portrayed in the media here recently.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, listen, I mean, this is the show and this is the platform where we just want to have real, meaningful conversations. And of course, you can take it in whatever direction you like. And I'm not trying to turn this into some battle royale where I've got, ministers looking to fight each other at the bike racks. That's not my mandate, but I definitely want to pick your brain. So why don't we start with this then?
Okay.
Let's look back a year. This was right around the time, about a year ago, where we all got a bit of a wake-up call on what this was going to start to look like. So what immediate steps? I mean, you've got a congregation of what? Probably like 1,000 people. What did you do right out of the gates?
Well, I remember all of these dates very well. A year ago, we were actually in California on a typical winter getaway, and we landed in Edmonton on March 11th, and the world was just changing rapidly. So it was Friday the 13th. I'll always remember that morning. We were not asked necessarily or forced to go online only, but that morning I was on the phone with multiple colleagues from different churches across the province, and a whole bunch of us within our faith tradition, which is the Christian and Missionary Alliance in Canada, a whole bunch of us, especially those of us who have slightly larger congregations, we all on that morning agreed that we would go online only before we were forced to, as a demonstration of our desire to be leaders in the response and to do our part to protect the community from the spread of what at that time was just creeping up on us, like you said.
Yeah, and honestly, none of us really had an idea, I don't think, of the implications it might have. I remember I looked back to where I was a year ago, and it was such a sort of almost a naive understanding of what was about to happen. How did your congregants, how did your community members respond when you initially said, this is kind of a hard stop, we're going online and online only right away?
What I'm grateful for is that within our congregation, there's a tremendous amount of trust from both our board and our congregation toward the pastoral leadership. So I don't recall hardly any pushback initially. There was a very quick response to say, hey, let's pause. We can maybe be part of the solution, not create any more problems. And that's been our posture as a congregation. We're deeply connected in partnership with our county, with various agencies throughout the city. So it's a very consistent thing for our community to say, hey, we have a leadership role here to play a little bit in the greater kingdom community. So no pushback whatsoever to that initial stop.
I wonder if maybe we have some folks that attend your church that are watching this morning, because I've got a Katie Berghofer says, boy, is it ever great to see Pastor Greg, even if it's not in person. How are you handling?
Well, Katie's one of our county commissioners here. So
okay, there you go. This is community is a big thing though, and this is. Listen, I'm going to talk about Grace Life. You can touch on it as much as you like or avoid it as much as you like. But a big part of their argument is that, this is the Lord's will, that people gather in community, that iron sharpens iron, that people are empowered as they need to be to go out and preach the gospel. As a matter of fact, their associate pastor, Jacob Spence, we played some of his sermon last Monday. He said, we're commanded to love our fellow man, and this is what we are doing. This is how we are showing it, by equipping people to go out and preach the gospel. He went so far as to call churches that are not gathering in person unfaithful. How do you respond to that? That's quite an interpretation of what the gospel message is.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of rhetoric within both in this country and other countries about why churches should absolutely defy authorities and insist on gathering. Those are usually rooted in certain New Testament texts, like the Great Commission, which is that charge to go and preach. There's admonitions in books like the book of Hebrews that says, don't stop meeting together. Then there's also texts like Acts 2, which is a description of the early church. They continued to meet together daily. And so we grab hold of those and we say, we got to do this. This is central to our calling. At the same time, there's also texts like love one another as I have loved you. The Great Commission goes with the Great Commandment in Jesus' words in Matthew 22 is love your neighbor as yourself. That's all part of the deal. So you got to be careful about pick and choosing the texts that you use to defend your position. And probably the most used text these days right now when it comes to defying authorities is the obey God rather than men text. That's from Acts chapter 5. Interestingly, the person who said that is quoted as saying that is the Apostle Peter, who also says in a letter that he wrote later that we have in our New Testament, 2 Peter, he also says, defend, obey the emperor, like be good citizens. So you have to take the whole when you look at scripture and get your marching orders. And for me and our congregation, we're really galvanized around the central teaching of Jesus. I prefer to use as my Great Commission, John 13, love one another as I have loved you. And the text that we forget is the verse 35 where it says, by this others will know. So I believe there's a community watching us around our church and around every church, and they're watching us and watching our behavior and deciding whether or not we really are followers of Jesus by our actions. And if they're loving, I think they're attracted to that. When we look like we insist on our rights above the love of Christ, I think that's a bad look.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Pastor. That to me is what I believe to be, I don't know if it's lost on these folks at Grace Life, and I don't know, here I'm going to get accused of kind of the both sides thing here, but I bet you that there probably are a bunch of wonderful people that attend that church that want to do well, that think that they're doing the right thing. In my opinion, this is my opinion, I think that they're getting bad advice, and I think that they're being led astray, and ultimately I think that they're hurting the greater cause. That's my opinion. Are you concerned? And this is not just Grace Life Church. I mean, you can Google examples. People piled on me. Some folks did a couple of months ago, and I said, why? For the most part, why is it seem to be evangelical Christians that are like leading the charge against these public health regulations? And we interviewed the Reverend Anna Greenwood Lee out of Calgary, who had some great comments on it as well. And people reached out and said, Ryan, you're piling on evangelicals, or this is your anti-Christian bias. And I said, hey, just Google pastor no mask, and you'll get like a million, from all across the United States. You'll see all across Canada. It's been this thing, in part, not exclusively with evangelical churches, but they're the ones that have the most frequent flare-ups here. Do you ultimately think that this is creating, I don't know if I want to say an image problem, but is this creating a problem for the church moving forward?
Massively. Like that is if there's anything that keeps me awake at night, and occasionally there is, this is what I'm deeply grieved about. I'm concerned about our reputation in the greater community, especially when you combine it with the last 4 years. Let's call it what it is. Our country here is heavily influenced by the political realities to the nation in the south of us. And over the last 4 years, I have just seen a greater and greater wedge being built between the church that I have dedicated my life to and the greater community. And anything that I can do or we can do to stop that gap from widening, that's what I want to be about.
So how have you managed to, when I think of attending church as a child, and growing up as a young man, for me, one of the big things was every congregation's different, but I think of like people that would gather in the foyer after the fact. We were always the family that was last to leave. We probably drove the janitors nuts because the fellowship was so key. And I remember pastors and even, elders or whatever it was, like they would stand by the doors and they would press flesh. They would shake hands with people and they would catch up with people. And in the Catholic tradition, there are the greetings and peace be with you, and community is so huge. So how have you managed? Has your church taken a hit? Has the effect? I'm kind of being a little bit facetious here, but has the effectiveness of your preaching taken a bit of a hit because you're limited to the internet?
That's a great question. Back to the starting point, back even in the fall fall of last year, when we first had to live, no, wait, that was spring. The time is all melding together, but
you're not alone.
I remember, thank you. I remember when there was some opening up again in the first time, we call it around our church, we're getting ready at some point here in the near future for relaunch 2.0. Back when we did relaunch 1.0, when some of my brothers and sisters in the Christian community were saying, how come restaurants can have a certain capacity and openness and churches have to remain closed? One of the things I said at the time to some of my friends is, hey, you got to remember, a restaurant experience is largely transactional. Like you come in, you place your order, they bring you food, you pay, you eat, you go. A church historically is communal. All to your point, there is handshaking, there is hugging, there is sitting and having deep, intimate conversations, encouragement, pats on the back, joking around, hanging, like even the sacraments, the partaking of communion, baptism, that sort of thing. Church is a very communal experience, which is why I think we were properly asked to stand down for a little while, because those are all very high-risk activities. As to whether or not we've taken a hit or we're still as effective, you better ask somebody else about the preaching thing. But I will say this, on the preaching side of it, if you're just looking for message content, I've had a lot of people tell me that when it comes to just listening to the message or the homily, that the digital side of that, the digital experience of that is actually pretty great. And some people prefer it. My wife loves watching church from in her pajamas and being able to really dial in on teaching, even when it's me. Sometimes she actually does that. But you can really focus, you can pause, you can have a conversation. You can't really do that in the church environment. But the other side of the communal side of church, that's what we're missing for sure. And that I wouldn't say we've taken a hit. We've just learned to find other ways to make that connection as opposed to just having it on the property on Saturday night or Sunday.
What are some of those ways? What are some of the steps that you've taken as a leader in the community, or what have you seen your congregants do?
Well, we've kind of been poor in the realm of smaller groups for a long time. That's not really been our strength. We've been a church kind of known for the big event and the big room and the big gathering and, you know, the big worship and all of that. I actually think that's not done us as many favors. I think in the church, we overestimate the impact of what happens in a big space. I think we underestimate what happens in smaller environments. One of the ways one of my colleagues on staff describes it, and I don't think this is original with him, is really good things happen in rows, but the best part of church is experienced in circles. And so we've just really gotten serious, maybe for the first time in several years, about groups. We call them life groups, helping people make meaningful connections with others. We've really upped our game, and our congregation has responded to that. We've done health checks to the vulnerable in our community. We've done a series of phone calls. We've got care teams that are calling people who are among our seniors, that sort of thing. So we've just found other ways to make connections. At Christmas time, one of our traditions at Christmas Eve, we typically have hundreds and hundreds of people that come to Christmas Eve services. We've been doing family photos as part of that environment for years. Well, we did it this year, but we did it outside. And we had photographers set up. We had a registration speaker come in, take their Christmas cards, have quick little meaningful connections. We gave them a gift. So we've just adapted and found other ways to try to make those connections, but we're missing it for sure still.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody in their own way is missing things. I know for people with faith traditions, church on Sunday or mass on Saturday, whenever it is, whatever your worship looks like, whatever faith you follow, the tradition is a huge part of it, which is a big part of the argument why a lot of folks are defying these health orders. So you're gathering exclusively online, and maybe you've already just answered this question, actually. You've had some really interesting points, but do you think in a way or in some ways has your community, has your church family, has the body of the church actually benefited in any ways? Do you think you might look back and say, boy, that was a real shot in the arm for us in a good way?
Well, if you'll indulge a short story.
Sure, yeah.
And this is just my opinion here, but about 13 months ago, we typically take some of our leaders away on a retreat, and we did that last year in January, maybe the first part of February. And at that gathering, as we were doing our planning for the following year, we ended up in a very spirited discussion, about 12 of us around a table, about, are we sort of addicted? I kid you not, I used the phrase at that meeting, I think we're addicted to gathering. And what I meant by that, the context of that was, as pastors, as ministry leaders, it seems like the only card we have in our hand, or the only tool we have in our toolbox, is calling everybody back to the campus for another thing. So that's almost an instinct for people like me. You want to address something or teach something or get after something, you call everybody back. And I said, at some point, we have to find a way to not be so dependent on this one tool. And so I said, what's it going to take for us to deal with this issue? And 6 weeks later, we were in a pandemic. I'm not saying I predicted anything, but in a weird sort of way, again, all human suffering aside, like, this has been horrible, economic impact, human suffering, sickness, death. Like, I want to be really cautious with how I say this, but this season has actually forced us to simplify, to adapt, to get creative, and to really overcome some of our overdependency on one ministry tool.
You by the way, in like true pastoral fashion, we were corresponding by email before, and you sent me these like bullet points. It's amazing. I feel like you could just preach right off this. You laid out the interview. You're like, I could talk about this. I can touch on this. It's like, I don't have to do any work on this, Pastor. But what is this? You hinted, and you said, if we have time, I can get into this. Well, that's what we have here on Real Talk. We got lots of time. What was this? You said you did something kind of quirky last fall that you'd never done before. What is that?
Well, I think that was in reference to, you said you might ask me what we've taught or what we've been teaching, where we've gone. And really, I typically am a few weeks and months out with what I think we're going to do. And I have a team, and we do this together. We scrapped all of our plans in the spring and said, anything we had planned, we have to adapt to what's happening in our world. And so in the summertime, we taught parables, and we first went online only. We actually did stories because we were realizing that what we're doing right now actually works really well for digital services, engagement with people. So we did like 10 weeks of just people telling their stories, and then short messages or homilies that come after that. Then the fall, though, the thing that was kind of fun is I taught a book of the Bible that I've never taught in all my years as pastor, and it was the book of Ecclesiastes. And most people know a few lines from Ecclesiastes because it was popular from a song from the 60s.
The Birds,
in every season. The Birds, exactly. Most people don't know that they're singing scripture when you sing that song. That's the part of Ecclesiastes that people are aware of. But we actually taught our way through the whole thing. And the basic message of Ecclesiastes is we're all going to die. Like, that is like, we're gonna die. We're all doomed. It's over. Like, what's the point? Like,
it's
we're
not wrong.
Die.
It's not
right?
wrong.
No, it's bang on. But this unnamed narrator basically says over and over and over, what's the point? What's the point? We're all gonna die. When you really get behind it, the whole message of Ecclesiastes is you're gonna die. So how are you gonna live? Live in light of your impending death. And it's kind of cheesy to invoke the country song, live like you're dying, but not bad. It's actually pretty biblical to say, okay, we're all headed to the same place, to the same end. So what are we going to do with the time we have? And it really worked well as COVID was building in October, November. And again, I'm sorry if that sounded like I was taking COVID lightly. I'm not at all.
No, I don't think so.
As things were getting, worse, and we're heading into the winter months, and we're all looking at, is Christmas canceled? We had that phrase. Well, just being really honest about our reality. And it was a really healthy thing for our congregation to grapple with our own impending demise.
I love it. And those are the types of conversations we need to have. You look at this and you sort of say, there's that meme that goes around. I don't even know the root of it. I should. I'm sometimes a little bit obtuse on the pop culture front, but there's like this cartoon dog, and he's surrounded by fire all around. And he just says, it's fine. And they just sort of think like that's been society these days, where if you're not reckoning with these big questions right now, what are you even doing? Yeah. Like that.
Well, this would be a perfect time to invoke Monty Python, only a flesh wound, that sort of thing. Like, I'm fine, I'm good.
I'm not dead yet.
Exactly.
Pastor, I would imagine if I know anything about your church, and we just showed your website here, and I know your worship team takes great pride in what they do. I would imagine the first service back in person, you guys are going to need $15,000 just for a pyrotechnics budget. I would imagine what's the one thing that you're most excited about when people are vaccinated, when these restrictions are lifted, and when you've got, what's your capacity? Are you guys like 1,200 or something like that?
Yeah, somewhere in that. We actually did a fairly significant renovation on our worship space about 4 years ago, and we made it much more multi-purpose. So we actually can configure it. Interestingly, it was kind of controversial at the time because it involved taking out the pews from the 60s and putting in an alternate form of seating that was movable. And I think, Ryan, you probably know that kind of change and how that affects certain people. And I'm grateful for those that sacrificed, 40 years ago to help us have the facility that we have. But at the time we said we want it to be more versatile. Well, now it's been awesome. So we can configure our space and pods and do a lot of different things. But yeah, if we have all the seating in there, it's around 12 or 1,300, something like that. What am I looking forward to? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, what am I looking forward to? Again, I think we've been able to do the preaching thing okay. I mean, I don't see anybody saying we're not getting the content or the teaching. And it's not just our church. You can get good content anywhere. There's tons of great communicators online if you want to look into the scriptures and be taught well. But what will be nice to come back together is that human connection. We had a taste of it in the fall because we did come back with all the protocols in place from roughly September 1 until end of November when things were going crazy. And we had a taste of it. A lot of our people aren't ready to come back yet. At that time, again, nobody was vaccinated and caseloads were going crazy. We're a few weeks away from reopening again. We've started to draw a circle around Easter, I think, is when we're going to relaunch again with adherence to all the protocol demands in place by our public health officials. But when I had that experience of people coming back and seeing each other, even if you don't touch or do the things you used to do, the eyeball to eyeball human connection was really, really important. And again, as spring opens up and we can just sort of spill out outside and have lingering conversations, I think that's what people want more than anything.
We're talking to Pastor Greg Hochhalter, Sherwood Park Alliance Church, spac.ca if you want to check it out. Let me just, this is our live chat, people that are watching us on YouTube right now. And by the way, everybody calm down. At some point, I am going to ask the pastor about all the baseball bats in the background, so everybody just chill out. Obviously that's coming, but I'm not making that the first. Can everybody just please focus and be serious for a second? We'll get on that in just a second, but there's a lot of great comments here. You know, Donna says, I bet you some people have actually joined churches over this past year because not everybody wants to really, put themselves out there. Tracy says, prior to the pandemic, we were a society that was becoming less and less resilient. Those who have embraced resiliency have navigated this pandemic well, and those who can't or won't are still struggling. Tara says virtual church services have extended reach. They allow for people from far and wide to attend. I know some that have been able to live stream from their church into their hometown across the country, which is an interesting point. Donna says, I think this is a pastor I'd be willing to listen to if I was religious. I describe myself as spiritual, and I believe in the Creator, but I like Greg. That's a compliment. What do you think?
Sure it is.
What do you think? I mean, we hear, Pastor, I don't have statistics. I don't have background. This is anecdotal, but I've heard people, and I've read some pieces, people talking big picture about the challenge facing the church. I've oftentimes seen it framed as the challenge facing the Catholic Church, but I think bigger picture, people are saying, with regards to faith tradition, fewer and fewer young people, Gen Z, millennials, what have you, are prioritizing church. There's obviously implications for churches with regards to fundraising and those types of things. What trends do you see? And with young people that are either continuing the tradition that their family has held and now raising their own kids in the church, or that are coming to the church, what do you observe? Why are they there? What are they telling you?
Well, there is no question that my own kids, who are 24 and 28, they are hugely impactful on our congregation, and our church doesn't even really know it yet. They and their partners and their friends, who my wife and I intentionally surround ourselves with as much as possible these days, virtually and outdoors and that sort of thing. But I'm trying very much to listen to teenagers and especially young adults, because they have a lot to say, and they are the generation most concerned about why Christians appear to be less loving than they ought to be. That is the generation. If you're 30 or under and you lack the capacity to lead with love, you're going to be watching the church, and you're going to be questioning whether or not they're really following the person with whom we claim to follow. So I tend to really want to hear from my assistant and some of the folks that I work with know that almost anybody basically who asks to hang out or asks for an appointment, if they're under 30, the answer is yes. It typically is yes for anybody, but I especially want to hear from that younger generation, because we need to pave the way. We're potentially losing a generation. And it's largely our sticking our own foot in it is what's causing a lot of the problem.
Yeah. Interesting note here from Haas, who quotes scripture, and he's referencing the Pharisees, and this in the context of gathering, right? The context of physically gathering in defiance of public health orders. You could probably guess the passage. He says, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Is that applicable here? You think Haas is demonstrating some insight there?
Yeah, sure. Because to the context of that, that's from the Sermon on the Mount. and Jesus is correcting a lot of stuff that you've heard it said, but I tell you. So that's kind of the rhythm of that segment of Matthew. I'll tell you how one way I apply this in our context. I've said to a lot of our people, and there's some restlessness with some of our folks, like, why aren't we shut down? Why don't we open up and that sort of thing? And again, we're getting there very soon. But I've said to a lot of our folks, we reside in Sherwood Park at the intersection of two of the, let's say, 6 major streets in Sherwood Park. We sit at a very prominent location, and we're a very visible church in our community. And so that means our community is watching us. And for the last few weeks, the easiest justification for not being together has been the fact that all these people, thousands of cars are driving by our building every day, like me, who are not getting together with family, who are not visiting their children. My wife and I spent our first Christmas without our grown kids this year. It kind of crushed us not to be with our kids.
Of course.
But we're doing what we need to do, right? So how can we justify, I have a hard time, the dissonance caused by me inviting 300 people into our building, which would be roughly our 15% capacity,
right. Inviting 300 people into an indoor gathering at a time when I can't have dinner with my son. The dissonance caused by that is I can't. So because of our visibility, to that point of that text of watching your actions in front of others. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's insight there. And I think you're right. I mean, a huge part of it is setting an example. Let me read some of these. I know you're going to value hearing these, Pastor. Tanya is watching in. She says, Pastor Greg is worried about the image that Grace Life and other radical elements have on people's perception of the church, but he here today is a good example of how a warm, loving, rational face matters too. This is from Craig, who says, can't you just ask God for forgiveness for missing church? I mean, God rested on the 7th day. He took breaks. There you go. Shalane says, I've been so jaded by religion and that has been heightened by what I've seen from Grace Life. It's good for me today to be reminded that community is the minority, and this pastor, I hope, is representing the majority. And if I can jump in, I absolutely think I am. Again, I every other week, I gather up with 7 colleagues, 3 from Edmonton and 4 from Calgary, and we're all journeying together, and we're all kind of part of the Alliance family in Alberta. But we've been all just really embracing our leadership role, talking together, networking together, and paying attention to how we're coming across to our wider community. Yeah, and intentional fellowship too. Like, this is interesting from Mark, who writes in. I'm making such an assumption here. This is horrible for me to do, probably. But Mark and I go way back. He used to listen to my old radio show from Salt Lake City every day, and he's come over and joined us here now. And just because he's in Utah, I'm assuming that Mark's Mormon, and I might be wrong about that, Mark, so my apologies. Yeah, be careful. I better be careful. I know that I know he'll correct me right away live here on the chat, but he says, I've seen a lot more individual interaction among my fellow congregants outside of church on Sunday over the past year than ever before. He says it seems like, before you only saw people on Sunday. That's an interesting observation. And I love this from Fatima, who's watching in. She says, no word of a lie, our Ramadan this year at home was the best. She says, we certainly missed attending mosque, but having everybody at home for a month further connected us as a family, and it was beautiful. So that's a great comment there. Let me give you an example of even how that's played out for me. In this weird sort of way with a couple of kids in Europe right now and a couple of kids in Quebec, it's deeply grieving that we're not able to be together, to not see our son for a year. That's never happened before. So yet in a weird sort of way, and to not have him at Christmas, in a weird way, I've never felt closer to my adult kids because we're leaning into each other a whole lot more. I'm so grateful that our kids actually want to talk to mom and dad, but we are conversing more than we ever have. In a weird sort of way, the distance has resulted in intentional pursuit of those critical relationships, and we're closer. So it's just a matter of your perspective a little bit. This whole thing has caused us to really look inward, see what matters. I probably feel closer to my wife because we've been home together a lot more and mostly gotten along. And so there's been some relational wins in all of this for sure. This is interesting. I've got kind of dueling narratives here. Lynn says, I wonder if Greg might actually be growing his congregation with this interview. She says, well-spoken, balanced, compassionate, genuine, truly Christian? That from Lynn. Meantime, Gilarax isn't satisfied with my previous question. It says Ryan needs to circle back and ask why so many young people are leaving church. It says atheism and non-religious groups are growing. Let me. So I've just Googled and I said young people leaving church. I Googled. So here's my return. Sam, we can even put it up on the screen if you want. So these are the returns. I get about 155 million returns. Out of 538.com. Millennials are leaving religion, not coming back. Christianity Today. The top reason young people drop out of church, breakpoint.org, why young people leave the church, focus on the family. That's Dr. James Dobson. Obviously, right-wing conservatives are young people leaving the church in droves. Anyway, the point is these conversations are happening. Do you see it happening in your congregation?
For sure. Among those that are trying to pay attention to what's happening in a world who have young kids or growing kids, that sort of thing. I think it's always an ongoing conversation about how are we passing our faith on to the next generation. I'm convinced that the best way to pass our faith on to the next generation is to orient ourselves under the banner of the teachings of Jesus. Because I do believe the Jesus way, if you really, sorry for this slight rabbit trail here, but one of the things that I will say sometimes is I'm not sure all scripture is equally rated. We have the Bible, and as followers of Christ, as believers, as religious people, we're people of the book, and that's our source and our authority, that sort of thing. But if I was to more, I think I properly weight the Gospels as most important, because if we believe that Jesus is the one to reveal the nature and the character of God, then what you see in the actions and the teachings of Jesus is love and grace and compassion and kindness and care for the marginalized. And that's something that the current young adult generation and teenagers, they're all about that. They're actually some of the most gracious, loving people I've ever met, and the most inclusive in how they approach friendships and relationships. And so I'm not suggesting that we're in horrible trouble or that it's doom and gloom, because I actually think the solution is right in front of us.
Greg, I want to just let you know how much we appreciate this conversation, your availability today. As mentioned, Joe and Chris and Cam in the pizzeria and other regular viewers are going to boycott this show if I don't leave at least a little bit of time for you to talk about this baseball shrine that you've got behind you and those bats in particular. Is there? I know you've got your headphones in here, but are you able to? Can you go get like one or two of your favorite bats, and would you be able to show us up? I mean, people love this stuff.
Okay, hang on a second.
All right, so here he goes. I'll provide a little voiceover here. We've been hearing from Pastor Greg Hochhalter, who's the lead pastor at Sherwood Park Alliance Church, spac.ca.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Well, I was just giving you a little filler. I was just giving you a little voiceover.
You're filibustering.
I'm filibustering. That's exactly what I'm doing. So tell us what we're seeing here.
Well, first of all, my decor, I'm in my basement bunker, and my daughter calls my decor dorm room. Is sort of my vibe. That's kind of what I'm going for. So I've got her old lava lamp. That's just my little shout out to my daughter back there.
Boy, there you go.
And so I've got like dartboards. I've got golf putting mats back there. I've got the spongy golf balls. I've been trying to work on my short game over the winter during COVID. My wife and I play darts around here a lot. For several years, I have this deep connection to the fire service, but as a guy who comes from the world of sports as well, for 5 years in Calgary, I was the chaplain for the Calgary Cannons in the 90s when we first moved to Canada. And so each of these bats, for the 5 years that I was the chaplain for the Cannons, at the end of the season, the team would sign a bat. So that's when we were back in AAA back then. So, and then this is one that was given to me as a gift. So if you can see that, my sister-in-law used to work for the Detroit Red Wings, who are owned by the Ilitch family, who own the Red Wings and the Tigers. And so when they went to the World Series, the Tigers in 2006, they got me a customized bat with my name on it from the Tigers. So Just a couple of little pieces of, like, again, where do I put this stuff, right? This is the one. My wife's got incredible taste, and we have our whole house very tastefully appointed. But down here, it's anything goes. I just put all my little junk on here that's meaningful to me.
I've got a hockey stick. We're lucky enough to attend a game, Russia, Sweden, 88 Olympic Winter Games in Calgary. Down by the glass after the game, a stick thrown from a player over to me. I grab it. I still have the stick. I went to Phil Pritchard with the Hockey Hall of Fame because I was trying to track down whose stick it was, and he helped me, and we determined that it was the stick that was used in the game by Alex McGillney, who scored with that stick And then that was the last game he played for the USSR before defecting over and joining the National Hockey League. And I still have, so it's like a phenomenal stick. And it's the, you imagine 1988, right? So it's old, it's wood. It has all of the branding spray painted black. In the Olympics, They couldn't show the brand names, all that kind of stuff. So I'm talking like this to my wife. I'm like, this is Alex McGillney's. And she goes, yeah? Like, yeah? I'm like, no, this needs to be like above the fireplace. Like, do you recognize? And no.
Yeah, it ain't happening.
It ain't happening. So
no,
I don't even have a nice.
I've got something over here. It's a hockey puck from 31 years ago or 30 years ago. It's a Minnesota North Stars puck.
Yeah.
Our 4th anniversary, I convinced my wife to go see a hockey game in Minneapolis, and it was the Kings North Stars. So Gretzky was in town. Let's go to the game. We got tickets fairly low, kind of blue line-ish. And back then the glass was lower, and this hockey puck came over midway through the game on a line. And it happened so fast. It came behind my wife's head like this much. Like she was on the aisle and I was next seated. And this puck came across and hit the bottom of the seat of the guy behind us, like between his legs almost. But I got the puck. And so I have the puck that almost took my wife out on our 4th anniversary, Minnesota North Stars, right over there.
There you go. Pastor Greg Hochhalter, a good pastor's got to know baseball and hockey because the metaphors abound. Lead pastor at Sherwood Park Alliance Church. Thanks so much for this. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Real Talkers, thank you for your comments on here as well. We've been sort of trying to keep up with the live chat, and there's some great conversations going on there. I know that a lot of you are have a lot of time for what Pastor has to say. I know a lot of you have no time for organized religion. That's totally fine. What this reiterates to me is that this is a community that is diverse. It's a community that comes at this thing from different perspectives, and I'm seeing agnostics and atheists and people living with Catholic guilt. I'm saying with a smile on my face, and evangelicals and people of the Jewish and Muslim faiths, and so many people here gathering in community every single day and talking about issues that matter, and I love it. Alyssa says we need a sports segment on this show. Yeah, maybe. Mike says that was a great interview. Tara says I was allowed to explore many different religions growing up, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that my moral compass was enough to guide my life without the guilt that I felt that religion had on me. Yeah, I mean this is great. And then some of you are just talking about your sports memorabilia, which is great. So yeah, this is awesome. Lauren says, what a great positive interview. Pastor Greg is impressive. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks, everybody, for the comments. I wanted to get to this email from Sherry. Sherry actually CC'd us on a letter, an email that she wrote to the Premier. And she says, Premier Kenny, I love when you CC talk at ryanjesperson.com. It lets the politicians know that you're keeping them honest as well, and that there's a chance that their letter might be read in front of, if I can say, Canada's most listened to daily news podcast audience. Sherry says, Premier Kenny, just in case you forgot, laws give us rules of conduct that protect everybody's rights, and I'm disgusted with what I've been seeing around my home in Alberta. When will the law be applied to all members of Grace Life Church, the many folks out there not wearing masks? We see police officers shaking hands with anti-mask protesters. I'm assuming talking about Chinook Center in Calgary on that video. And we're just keeping people safe while they protest. Your silence, Premier, sends a dangerous message that my life and those that are taking the virus more seriously doesn't matter. Which communities are you protecting? Because it sure doesn't look like you're here for the average law-abiding Alberta citizen. That from Sherry, who CC'd Real Talk. I thank you for that. The team at Clean Air Club wants to make sure that your family is not just saving money, but breathing easy. And if you can accomplish both of those things at the same time, why wouldn't you do it? You know that your furnace filter needs to be changed. If you're like me, all of a sudden you kind of have this wake-up call, once every kind of maybe 3 or 4 months, and you go, oh my gosh, the furnace filter. And by the time you check it and you look, you go, ugh, because you think of all the air that's running through the vents in your house. I know I'm painting a gross picture right now, but that's kind of the point. All the air that you're breathing is going through that filthy filter. So you want to make sure you change it on the pace it should be changed at cleanairclub.ca. You register, you let them know what size furnace filter you need, typically the next day, or within a couple of days. It's right there on your doorstep, a good ample supply so you can keep them in that regular replacement rotation. Plus, you're going to pay less than you would in the store, and they provide a little gift for you. A little gift. Real talkers are loving that. You can register today at cleanairclub.ca. Also wanted to remind you, at altastorage.ca, you'll find the team at Alta Moving and Storage. As the name would suggest, they're in 2 businesses, and they do them better than anybody else in Alberta. If a move is in your near future, but it makes your palms sweat because you're just envisioning the stress that comes with it, that big rig, that 18-wheeler parked outside your house, the movers are waiting and you're not ready to go, pod-style containers allow you to move at your pace. That's what they do well, plus long and short-term storage solutions and those eco-friendly frog boxes, the future of moving boxes too, at Alta Moving and Storage. I first met this guy a number of years ago, and if you're just about to meet him for the first time, brace yourself, because he's a compelling speaker. He's a doer. As a matter of fact, he's about to kick something off on Friday that's a big deal. He's a published author. He's a celebrated speaker. And all of this, though, based on his response to great tragedy in his own personal life. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the show Mike Cameron. Mike, it's so good to reconnect. I feel like it's been, a couple of years, it feels like, since we last spoke.
Yeah, it's we talked, I think, last May around this time. I did the same thing, and so we had a similar conversation. So I'm super grateful to be here, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Well, you're not afraid of tough conversations. You're the author of a book, Becoming a Better Man, and I know that you embrace opportunities to talk about men and emotions and the price of patriarchy and grief and fatherhood and what it means to be a good partner. For a lot of people that speak with great passion, it comes from resilience, I think, and as a result of the journey of recovering from or rebounding from tragedy. For those that aren't familiar with your personal story, you have experienced loss in the most horrific fashion. Will you tell us your story?
Yeah, you bet. I will. I'm going to change names a little just to respect family privacy.
Sure.
But yeah, in October of 2015, Friday morning, I woke up like pretty much any morning, and Carissa had to teach yoga, so got up early at 6 a.m. and went out to go teach yoga. I rolled over, went back to sleep, and got up around 7 a.m., shot out that text, said, "Hey, how was yoga?" and got no response. Kind of carried on about my day and had breakfast. A couple of phone calls later, no response, and went about my morning. And ultimately, you start getting that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you just know something's not right. And so a couple more texts and no response, and again starting to feel like this is really out of character. And ultimately, I got that phone call, and the voice on the other end of the line said, "Is this Mike Cameron?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is Constable so-and-so." And I got to tell you, Ryan, I don't remember his name, and my heart just sank. And I just said, is she okay? And he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Is she okay?" And he says, "Where are you? We're at your house. We're coming to you." And so I told him where I was. I hung up the phone and walked out of the restaurant where I was and waited outside for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 or 6 minutes, and stood there on the curb, and ultimately an unmarked police car pulled up across the street, and this big badass burly looking cop gets out and starts walking towards me, and we meet halfway across the street. And after identifying who I was, he just looked me in the eye and he said, "Carissa is dead." And I just stood there in shock, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And what had happened was she had been shot and killed by an ex-boyfriend who subsequently took his own life. And we have these pivotal moments and these things that we just think can't happen to us. There was some conversation about privilege in the chat room earlier that I was watching, and as a middle-aged white dude in Sherwood Park, you take for granted the things that you have. And this kind of thing doesn't happen to me. This is the kind of thing that happens in made for TV movies. This isn't real life. And, ultimately, as I sat there in the back of that unmarked police car, and I just sat there saying, this can't be real. This can't be real. This can't be real. But eventually realized that, you know what, this was probably the most real thing I was ever going to face in my entire life.
Had there been, had you been aware of the domestic violence that was about to manifest itself in such a devastating way? Is this something that you as a couple had been dealing with in past? Were you totally blindsided? I mean, obviously the death would blindside anybody, but is this something that had she been living in fear? Had you been aware of this, suspected it?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely red flags. There were definitely issues that were being addressed, and hindsight's 20/20. If I knew then what I know now, I mean, certainly things would have been done differently, but you can't dwell on that. And so I look at, certainly I had many people surround me, and a lot of folks wanted me to go after the justice system, which certainly failed her at that time. And when I looked at this, and I looked at sort of my career, and we can backpedal a little bit and talk about, you talked about how I talk about the impact that emotion has on human behavior. And when I looked at, how could I best serve, how do we build a better restraining order is akin to putting a Band-Aid on a ruptured jugular. And I really wanted to look at how do we get to the root cause of this? How do we prevent men getting to this point in the first place? This was a man that made a decision with very permanent consequences based on a very temporary emotion. And as men, if we don't understand those underlying emotions that drive the decisions that we make, that ultimately drive the behaviors that we take, we have zero chance of living a fully awakened and purposeful existence. So again, to me, as an entrepreneur, as a business guy, it's about getting back to that root cause.
So do you think, are you saying, had you not experienced this great loss and this personal tragedy and the loss of your partner, your loved one, do you think would life have taken you to the point where you're at now? Do you think you would have written a book? You think you'd be talking about people? You think you don't write, and you can't tell men how to be better and how to smash the patriarchy or how to get in touch with their emotions, unless you've figured out or on the road to figuring out that for yourself.
Yeah. So to be clear, I mean, this is a journey. This is a process. So I had, in fact, started this book long ago. And it started out as really a business book. As a speaker, I've taught sales and leadership stuff. Again, always talked about the impact that emotion has on human behavior, but always in the context of sales and leadership. So that's where this book had started. I often issued what I would consider a 30-day challenge to those that come to my keynotes. And I thought, well, if I just put together maybe a series of, 60 to 90 second videos that I could put out on a daily basis for those that came and saw me speak, I could give them something to take away that they could implement after the talks. And so as I started writing out the scripts for these videos, I got 1,000 to 2,000 words per video, and, times 30, all of a sudden it's like, this is starting to look like a book. And so that's where the book began. And then it shifted. I started really exploring, probably a decade ago, I really started exploring that masculinity piece and what does it mean to be a dude? And Carissa used to always tease me about how badass I was as a business owner, a rock climber, a yogi, an Ironman, an ultra marathoner. I would always get teased about how badass I was. And I got to tell you, as a guy that's always been more sort of geek than jock, that always made my heart swell with pride.
Right.
But it was a trip to Penticton where I was going to be competing in an Ironman event, that, I really got a lesson on what it means to be badass. And that was my 65-year-old aunt, who lives in Penticton, had us over and was telling us this story about how she had decided she was going to do this 5K fun run leading up to the race, leading up to the event that I was doing. And she's telling us this story. She says, I knew full well I was going to be dead last, but I wanted to do it anyways. So, Saturday morning comes and I line up way at the back of the pack because I don't want all these kids passing me. She says, the gun went off and off I go, and I ran, and, I get within 750 meters of the finish line, and she says, all of a sudden, this kid on a bike starts riding beside me. And of course, when she says kid, she's talking about probably somebody in their late 20s, early 30s. It was one of the event organizers. She says, I looked over at him and I said, you're here because I'm last, aren't you? Mm-hmm. And he says, yep, I'm afraid so. But you're doing great. You're doing great. And he starts cheering her in. And so she finishes telling us this story. She says, I got within 100 yards of the finish line, and I could see that I'm so far last. They've already started packing up the PA system. They've already started tearing down the finish line. But when he let them know she was still out on course, they set everything back up. So she finishes the story and goes to clear the table. And we just looked at each other, and she says, you know what, Mike? She goes, now that's freaking badass. And so that entire drive home from Penticton, we talked about what does it really mean to be a badass, and especially in the context of masculinity. And we happened to be listening to Brene Brown on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he talked about, he said, what do you think of the over-feminization of boys in our school system? And I thought, oh, that's an interesting question, but she handled it brilliantly.
It's a loaded question.
It really is. Well, she handled it brilliantly because, it caught my attention. I thought, okay, how's she going to handle this? She said, Tim, I don't believe that masculine and feminine are mutually exclusive. And then she said something that wrapped it all together for me. She said, I believe that the perfect combination of tough and tender is that exact equation for badassery. I thought, boom, there it was. And if you followed Brene's work, she also talks about how vulnerability is the core of all emotion. So, my 65-year-old aunt having the courage to be as vulnerable as she was, competing in an event, knowing full well she was going to finish dead last. I mean, that's courage. That's vulnerability. That being the core of all emotions. Emotions drive their decisions. Decisions drive our behaviors. Again, to me, this just comes back to, as men, what we need to do.
There's a lot of talk these days, and it's positive. We talk about the patriarchy, and we'll get, depending on who we're talking to here on the show, we'll see it in the live chat. And I love the responses. People just start holding up the raised fist and smash the patriarchy, and people talk about this, and you talk about masculinity. More and more people are educating themselves, or learning more, or debating what is toxic masculinity. James is watching us live this morning, and he says, men have been emotionally stunted for years. Yes. So let me just ask you to run with that, because obviously it seems like you've got something to say there.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so we talk a lot about mental health, and in particular for me, men's mental health is a critical component. But I would like to shift the conversation a little bit, because I think when we talk about mental health, it's this on or off. You're either healthy or you're sick. But I like to talk about emotional fitness, because we understand there are varying degrees of fitness, from extremely overweight and out of shape to, David Goggins fit. There's a spectrum there. So that emotional fitness piece, I think, is critical. And to your listener's point, we're stunted. We don't have the opportunity to practice that emotional fitness. We know that if we want to get physically fit, we go to the gym, we lift weights a couple of times a week, we get physically fit. Yet when it comes to our emotional fitness as men, what do? And the answer for most is absolutely nothing. We don't do anything. when it comes to our emotional fitness. So really, it is absolutely critical to our mental health. And I'll say that because it is important. But again, I think when we talk about mental health, it's this, either I'm sick or I'm not. So it's easy to dismiss mental health as, well, I'm not sick, I'm okay. But if we talk about emotional fitness, certainly all of us are somewhere along the spectrum of fitness when it comes to our emotional health. And so, I work with a lot of business leaders. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and salespeople. And I got to tell you, Ryan, the more emotionally fit you are, the better you are as a leader. And one of my favorite things that I talk about all the time is, it's that emotional reconnection practice. And the reason I'm passionate about that is because emotionally connected men don't friggin' kill people. Emotionally connected men don't kill themselves. Emotionally connected men make better partners. They make better fathers. They make better leaders. They make better human beings. And so it's critical in so many domains, so many arenas, that we have this conversation and create these opportunities for men to really find ways to practice that emotional fitness and practice that vulnerability.
What do you think is the biggest thing standing in the way of emotional? I mean, maybe you have to approach it from a case-by-case basis. But is there one common thing that stands in the way of emotional fitness, and in particular for men?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's still a lot of societal stigma about men expressing emotions. We're definitely moving the needle in that regard. So my concern with that is, as we move the needle and we start to have more conversation, it starts to get easy to just tune that out as meaningless platitudes. So again, for me, I come at it from this, okay, so because guys, like, we want to perform, we want to provide, we want to excel, we want to drive, we want to produce, we want to be excellent. So I come at it from that lens. Like, if that's what you want to do, this is the path to do it. And oh yeah, by the way, it also solves a lot of these other issues that we're seeing. And that emotional fitness, your mental health, the amount of anxiety, depression, all of these things that we're seeing in society these days come to the forefront, especially because of the pandemic, the isolation. Again, it's critical that we create these spaces. And for me, that's what it comes down to, is creating these spaces, not only to talk about it, but to practice it. And again, for me, when I got divorced in 2012, and I really dove into sort of that inner work. I worked on my physical fitness, I found yoga, I found meditation, and I started doing that inner work. But what I realized was, coming back to that vulnerability piece, vulnerability by definition isn't something we can practice alone. Vulnerability by definition takes more than one person. So creating these spaces and opportunities for men to get together and to share and say, hey, Ryan, you know what? I got to tell you, man, like, I'm really nervous right now. I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about how this message is going to be received. So, I use a framework that I call SOAR: slow down, open up, accept, and reconnect. So I actually employed that before we went live here. Because
hang on a second. Slow down, open up, accept, and reconnect?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that slow down is just practice that pause. Take that breath. And then open up. Okay, I'm anxious, I'm nervous. And that's okay. Okay, don't bury it, don't avoid it, don't man up through it, don't push through it. Just open up and let it come. And then accept that. Okay, yeah, I accept, I'm nervous. I'm nervous. And then I can reconnect with my inner self and my purpose. And for me, my purpose showing up here with you is to share this message and have this conversation. So, it's so powerful. Like, even in the boardroom, I use this. Taking 60 seconds at a board meeting to just say, okay, you know what? We're just going to take 60 seconds and we're going to pause. We're going to breathe. I don't want to get all new age and woo-woo, but we're just practice the pause. And what that does is most of us these days, we're rushing to our computers to hop on our next Zoom meeting, and we're frantic and we're out of sorts, but when I create that 60 seconds, it's like, okay, I can slow down, I can get fully present, I can open up to the moment, I can accept why I'm here, and I can reconnect with our purpose of whatever today's meeting might be. And so it's a framework that works exceptionally well. Again, for me, it started as sort of this men's work thing, but it absolutely extends into the work I do with business and organizations as well. It's been just absolutely unbelievable.
You should see our live chat right now is awesome. And I'm seeing a lot of new names in here, at least new to me, because I just kind of drop in on the chat. But what that's telling me is that people are opening up now that might not otherwise be chiming in on different conversations, which is great. Blake says we are all works in progress, learning as we go. Hopefully all striving to be better as we go as well. Craig, I wanted to give a shout out to his podcast, but he says that it's a private, they only circulate within their friends, which is great. But he says they do a podcast, they record one with friends where they talk about a lot of life issues, and mental health is one of them. And he says it's taught me a lot of new things about guys I've known for more than 15 years. And they value it so much that they do it semi-weekly. Wigwith is watching, says so much in our society tells men to be strong, and sometimes we need to accept that we're weak, or that we need to reach out for help. I don't think reaching out for help is a sign of weakness. I think that it's, I was talking about this the other day where someone had referred to something as a crutch. And as a matter of fact, we were having a conversation, just another light conversation about religion. And a friend of mine says, well, religion is a crutch. And I sat there and I thought, yeah, and people can have different interpretations, and for everyone, their life is going to be different. Their priorities are different. But what is a crutch? A crutch is a tool that we use to help us stand and to help us move around. And quite frankly, crutch to me is not a derogatory word. And everybody's got crutches in their own way, right? I mean, this is all a matter of perception.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, to touch on the privilege thing, because I talk about this, and I want to acknowledge, absolutely, like I said, as a middle-aged white dude, I carry some privilege with me. My hope is that I can use that privilege to impact change. But we also need to acknowledge that with that privilege comes a price. Like, there is a weight that men are carrying. And it's sometimes not politically correct to acknowledge that, because we've got it all. We've got the privilege, for sure, absolutely. But we also carry this weight, this feeling that we have to be the provider, we have to perform, we have to take care of the family. And we wear this armor, and we carry this weighted vest around with us. And I talk about this all the time, this weighted vest that we carry. And I often ask guys, so what do you do for relief? And, I was recently talking to one guy who plays guitar, and he said, that's my relief. I said, so when you play guitar, is that weighted vest still there? He says, no, I take it off. I said, okay, but what happens when you stop playing guitar? He says, yeah, you're right. I put it back on again. And when we can get around a table together as men and we can start to share that, you know what, yeah, I do feel this, and I don't want to burden my partner because, COVID's got me worried about my job, and as the man, I'm supposed to provide for my family. And again, I know the narrative is changing, and I know intellectually we all know that, but there's still these deep-seated and ingrained beliefs about who we're supposed to be as a man. So this whole becoming a better man, for me, it's not prescriptive. It's not me saying thou shalt and you need to. This is simply my story, because I've had, sort of three sort of pinnacles of adversity in my life that I talk about in the book. When I was a teenager, I was a jerk. Mom and dad shipped me off to Australia to live with my Uncle John. I got into a car accident over there. I was almost killed. In my 20s, I worked for a finance company that turned out to be one of the largest Ponzi schemes in British Columbia history, lost millions of dollars for people I cared very deeply about.
Wow.
So all of the things I learned trying to run with the pack of the badass businessman and the, be that hyper masculine dude. That's just me sharing those stories because I think there's a lot of lessons.
Can we keep? I asked you to stay here till 10:30. We're already way past that. If you're listening live, obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, time is irrelevant. But can you stick around a little longer? Do you have another interview to do?
Good, for sure.
Okay, hang tight. Because we're. I feel like we're just getting started here, and the audience is loving this. Gillarax writes in to say, "Hey, Ryan, you want to talk about podcasts? The team at Sick Boy Podcast are really great. They talk a lot about mental health." Tracy says, I have 3 boys and we've been working on their emotions and their feelings all the time. And it's more important than schoolwork to us. Tracy, I think that's great. NQ says, raising a sensitive, emotional boy over here. We're continually butting up against cultural expectations of toxic male identity while trying to teach emotional literacy to my son every day. Eric says we have to talk about an unwillingness to be vulnerable. William says I'm learning my own mental health is a bit of a mess, but I'm always learning and I'm growing and I'm trying to get over past issues, which is amazing. We're talking to Mike Cameron more in just a second. Want to pause very quickly to remind you that running a small business is not a 9-to-5 job, and neither is taking care of your employees. And that's where a group benefit plan from Alberta Blue Cross can help with digital tools that do the heavy lifting for you from start to finish. Your employees can enroll and manage their benefits digitally anywhere on any device, and as plan administrator, you can oversee the entire account, all in real time, all within your budget. Learn how Alberta Blue Cross makes managing your health and dental, life, and disability coverage simple and affordable at abbluecross.ca. We told you yesterday how excited we are to add the team at McBain Camera to our family of Real Talk builders. They're Alberta's best destination for photographers and content creators. They invite you to tell your story beautifully with the Nikon Z50 camera. You'll get stunning 4K Ultra HD with 1080p slow motion time-lapse mode and a whole lot more, including that flip-down LCD screen to activate self-portrait mode. It's perfect for taking selfies. You can download Nikon's webcam utility and live stream from Zoom or Twitch or YouTube or whatever else like a pro. And right now, when you order a Nikon Z50 body or kit at McBainCamera.com and use the promo code REALTALK, one word, REALTALK is a promo code, they're going to give you a free ProMaster Hitchhiker tabletop tripod with your order. McBain's knowledgeable staff eager to help answer all your questions in person at 6 Alberta locations or at McBainCamera.com. A remarkable conversation that we're having right now with Mike Cameron. He's the author of Becoming a Better Man. And Mike, I'm captivated by what we're seeing here on our live chat. How about this from Trisha? I mean, we're hearing from a lot of parents right now that are saying, we're working to raise our own kids, our own boys in particular. NQ said to teach emotional literacy to my son every day. Trisha wonders, how do we support as women, the men in our lives, to not see it as, here we go, I know you want this one, to not see it as weak, right? To even broach the subject of feelings, never mind getting really, truly working on something constructive and healing. What's your message to the ladies out there?
Yeah, you know what? It's challenging for sure to get the men engaged. But one of the things from a partner perspective is really just to be supportive. Again, you're not there to fix anything. You're just there to listen. And I think, and especially as guys, we tend to do this. So this is what I have to get over with the guys all the time is when I open up and share, if in the example I gave you earlier, if I'm sharing to you, Ryan, that I'm feeling a little nervous, I can almost guarantee that your instinct was to right away say, you know what, Mike, don't worry about it. Don't be nervous. It's all good. You wanted to fix me. You wanted to fix that. And that's not what's needed. I just need to be able to sit with that feeling. So for a partner to create the environment where it's okay for their husband, their male partner to do that is critical. And it can be challenging because a lot of times, our partners are and I'm using, a heterosexual couple, our female partners are our only emotional support. So what I've seen happen in some cases is it can be threatening to the partner when we see the guys getting together and getting emotional support somewhere else. And I think it's really important for them to do that because it's a different kind of emotional support. But I know as a partner, it can be a little bit threatening. Well, wait a minute. I'm his emotional support. If he starts getting his emotional support from some other dudes, maybe he doesn't need me as much. And so that, I mean, just that's something to be aware of. Again, it's that slow down, open up, accept, and reconnect. If that's coming up for you as a partner, take that pause and just open up and say, okay, is that coming up? Accept that that's there. It's okay, right? Because if we don't accept, we get into this, now I feel crappy for feeling crappy, and it becomes this big spiral.
Yeah.
And we go downhill. But when we can accept that, okay, yeah, that is what I'm feeling. I'm now aware of it. And, as Eckhart Tolle talks about, with awareness comes choice. Now we can make the choice about how we show up. One of my favorite YouTube videos, besides your show, of course, there was It's Not About the Nail. I don't know if anybody's seen that. I think it was an insurance commercial where it's a guy and a girl, and she's literally got a nail stuck in her head, and she's complaining and talking about this headache, and he wants to fix it. He wants to pull the nail out. Well, I think the headache is because you've got a nail in your head. And she's saying, you just don't understand. You're just not listening to me. I just have this headache. So that's worth Googling and watching that video because that's exactly what we need to do. Go ahead.
No. I don't mean to step on your toes. I can't wait to get back in studio. I'm so desperate for in studio conversations. I'm always stepping on people's toes on Zoom, but I'm blown away at what I'm seeing in our live chat right now. And this is great. I just know that when this podcast goes out too later today, that we're going to see a huge response to this. You should see this. I mean, everybody, Hope writes in and says, I worked in the car business for 30 years. It's like toxic to the extreme. It's even worse with young men. Says I was hoping they'd soften up, and I did notice that some would open up and share their fears. I saw another comment from here, a listener. I'm going to try to track it down. That says, in boardrooms, here it is. Wigwith says, the business world is full of toxic masculinity. I've sat in a room full of salespeople, and even the women are acting like dudes. Showboating and bragging. I guess maybe in part, because that's kind of been the rules of engagement, do you think, Mike? I mean, that's sort of what people have perceived to be the necessary approach to success.
Yeah, that one for me is really interesting. That sort of gender equity piece at the corporate level is critical. And yeah, I mean, that's part of my fear is that for our female counterparts, we don't want the pendulum to swing so far into that, again, and I hate the term toxic masculinity because I don't believe that masculinity in and of itself is toxic.
Okay, yeah, let's get into this.
Right, but it's some of those characteristics. So what I don't want to see is women having to start to exude those toxic characteristics to get ahead and to get equal. And so that's where I think there's also potential troubles. So when I talk about gender equity, if we can have this conversation and we can get, emotionally connected men aren't afraid of women as peers. They're not afraid of women as superiors. Most of the inequity comes from insecurity. So if we can get rid of the insecurity and really have that conversation with, okay, why do you feel threatened, Mike? When you see a female rising up through the ranks, or, why does that threaten you, Mike? And then you give me the space to be able to unpack that and say, I don't really know. I've never really thought about it before, but it just annoys me.
Yeah.
Or, maybe there is a legitimate reason or legitimate in my head why it threatens me. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's soar through that. Because when we can do that, and if we do that and we can elevate sort of the consciousness of men, and I don't love generalizing, but if we can elevate that, then that whole gender equity conversation, it kind of goes away and we just come together.
You realize that, like, I'm just making an observation here that might be obvious, and I'm sure it's not lost on you, but one of the things about the way that you communicate, which I really appreciate, is you have these like little snippets that you throw in that are quite inclusive. Like, you note, for example, when you're describing a heterosexual couple, you note that. Or you talk about, you don't like necessarily the phrase toxic masculinity because you don't think masculinity is inherently toxic, or these types of things, that gender equity in the boardroom. And so much of your message is approachable. And that's one of the things that I think is really important here, right? Because, having these conversations, I talked to a buddy the other day, and he works in a certain industry where he said that the homophobic language that he encounters is pervasive and perpetual. And he wants to stand up and say something about it, but he fears that he would be ostracized. And he said it's so normalized that he just knows that the first thing he says is going to be like drawing this line in the sand, which I reminded him is not necessarily a bad thing. But
Yes.
But having these conversations, sometimes like just getting started, just getting the ball rolling, can feel like such a huge hump to get over, because people feel threatened. People can get defensive. There's tradition, right?
Yeah. So this is such a great conversation, because a couple of things with that one. If you need to have that conversation where somebody's not being appropriate, one of the quick tools that I use is just to tilt my head and say, I don't get it. And then just wait.
Right.
And see what comes up. So make it a little bit awkward. I don't get it. Or this one for me was a game changer. When I shifted from judgment to curiosity, everything opened up. Again, I used to have some pretty alt-right kind of beliefs. And I used to be quite judgmental. And I still catch myself today. But one of my core values is curiosity. And my mantra for that is curiosity over judgment. So I use that judgment piece as a trigger to grab curiosity. As soon as I start catching myself going, oh, I don't like the way Ryan looks today, or I don't like the way Ryan's shirt's hanging, or why hasn't he shaved his beard, or, whatever. As soon as I catch myself getting judgmental, then I quickly flip that into curiosity. Okay, Ryan, why are you wearing that today? Why did you change those glasses?
Can we make this about Sam? Can we make it about Sam?
Yeah. Well, Sam and I were geeking out about gear while I was waiting
were you?
for you.
Okay,
so.
okay. But yeah, you know what? I love what you're saying about your core value of curiosity. I remember when I did an interview right at the inception of this show back in November, and somebody said, "What's your mandate, or how do you approach each show?" And I said, "Well, we promise to our audience we will be perpetually curious." And that's the mandate of the show. And that's, quite frankly, I've driven my career. I think on a personal side, emotional exploration, what you're talking about is huge. I want to get back to you wouldn't believe the number of comments we have. Ann says, my 10-year-old son comes home probably once a week wondering, why do I cry so easy? I hate it. Why don't my friends cry so easily? Why is it just me? I had to find a place today, Mom, to hide so they wouldn't laugh at me. I'll let you answer this, but let me say my answer is, you just tell those other 10-year-olds on the school ground that Ryan Jesperson, a full-grown man, was weeping at the movie The Art of Racing in the Rain the other day. You just tell them that a 43-year-old grown-ass man bawls at movies. I think crying's okay. And I think that's another thing. But what do you say? I mean, for parents that are watching right now, Mike, especially these parents, a lot of them chiming in with young boys, age 7 to 14 kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. And, you can't not acknowledge the fact that it's challenging when your peers are laughing at you for crying. So the message, it's okay to cry, is great, but it's about addressing where are these feelings coming from the other boys or the other people that are taunting you and teasing you. But the beautiful thing is, again, for me, it's not about the crying. It's about the depth of emotion. And so when you can experience that sadness to that level, to that depth, without bottling it up, without pushing it down, that means you can also experience the other side, the joy, the excitement, the happiness. And I got to tell you, Ryan, like for me, the difference has been living in black and white and living in 4K full color. The depth of experience, the richness of experience that my life has now, that I've learned to really, truly, honestly be able to feel to that level is incredible. So yeah, there's some price to pay for being that vulnerable, but the reward is unbelievable. So you're right. I mean, absolutely, we encourage our kids to continue to show our emotion. And maybe we have that conversation about some of this comes from a place of insecurity when they're the taunting and laughing. I mean, maybe they wish they could be that emotionally expressive.
Yeah.
Maybe they wish they could feel as deeply as you can. Maybe they wish they could be as happy as you are when you're happy. Because if you're that sad, probably or that expressive, then probably you're that expressive on the other end of the equation as well.
Yeah, that's really well said. Heidi says, there are so many jobs that require people to turn off their emotion for the greater good, kind of high conflict involving tragic circumstances. The relief for that buildup is necessary but rare. Audra says, listening to this is so empowering. I'm raising a young man who suffered childhood trauma, and we're working through that, and I'm trying to make sure that he realizes that he can be vulnerable. Craig says, I knew some people, men and women, who thought that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, was the coolest thing ever, and they wanted to do that. And I thought it was horrifyingly bad, and I was cheering for the FBI agents when I was watching the movie. That's a hilarious comment.
Well, I lived The Wolf of Wall Street. That was my finance experience. It was that kind of thing.
Amazing. Kaylin says, my fiance and I had a really cool conversation recently about what aspects of masculinity I value in myself and what aspects of femininity he values in himself. And it was a great way to get past the stigma. Donna says, the best thing that happened for my partner's mental health when he retired, he started meeting his retired friends for coffee. Gilarax says there's this toxic idea that straight males cannot be emotional for fear of being seen as gay. I've seen it in friend groups, and it's a really messed up way of seeing things. These comments, I don't have enough time to read all these. These are amazing. And I would encourage people that are listening to this podcast, go back. And I think if you watch this interview with Mike on YouTube, you'll be able to see the comments, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Mike, before we talk about what you're going to be doing on Friday, I've got a few people. I love this from Connor, by the way. Connor McCannabis he's doing my work for me and promoting a segment that's coming up tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 o'clock Eastern. He says maybe men with all these insecurities that are feeling threatened by these conversations need to look at psychedelics and therapy. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we've got a roundtable. I'm still trying to think of a creative name for it. But we're going to be talking about psychedelics. We're going to be talking about ayahuasca and psilocybin and how microdosing mushrooms is helping a lot of people deal with trauma and mental health, which is, I think, going to be a fascinating hour-long conversation tomorrow. Some people are asking me to talk to you or to ask you about this event that goes on. I think somewhere here in Alberta. Where did I see it? I feel bad I can't find it now. Oh, Connected Men. What's this all about?
Yes.
Are you tied in with it? What's this all about? I'm just seeing it now for the first time.
Yes. So I founded an organization called Connected Men.
Okay.
It's Connect''D. The intent is to do exactly what we've talked about. Create a space where guys can come together and literally practice feeling. They can practice that vulnerability. And SOAR is the framework that we base that on. And we just share. We have a theme every week that we dive into. If one of the guys has something they need to unpack that's not related to the theme, well, they're obviously welcome to do that. So, we've talked about grief. We've talked about loss. We've talked about love. We've talked about achievement. We've talked about pushing your edge. How do you strive? And diving in real deep. And again, the rules of engagement are simple. We speak with emotion. We practice getting out of our head and into our heart. We're not there to fix anything. So again, if I tell you that I have a problem, I'm struggling with my marriage, I'm struggling with my kids, I'm struggling with whatever, we're there to hear you. We're there to allow you to express how do you feel? And again, I practice with the guys. We start with the physical, because for guys, most of us are pretty attuned to what's going on with us physically. So we'll start with that, and we'll sit and we'll do that slow down. We'll do that, we start with a 5 to 10 minute meditation, and then we just check in. And, right now my back's a little tight, jaw's tight. And then we move into that emotional component. What are you feeling? I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling uplifted. I'm feeling freaking inspired right now. And then we'll dive into our theme, and then we'll, again, do sort of round table. So right now, because of COVID, obviously we're meeting virtually.
Yeah.
We meet every Wednesday night at 6:30 Mountain Time. If anybody wants to join us, it's wide open and it's free. Obviously we limit numbers. I think we're probably good up to a maximum of 12. We've had as many as 16 in a live environment. But yeah, it's incredible. When guys come together with intention, man, the things that happen are incredible.
Mike, you're about to undertake this, you say Goggins Challenge. Is that what this is? Challenge for a Safe Place, coming up on Friday. I've linked, we'll show it here on the screen, but if people are looking to link to the website, they can just follow me on Twitter at Ryan Jesperson. I've linked to it there as well, and to you. Tell us what this is all about. I know that you have a huge conviction when it comes to the Strathcona Shelter Society, based on your personal experience and obviously the tragic murder of your girlfriend.
Yes. So I sit on the board of the Strathcona Shelter Society. I'm also an ultra marathoner. So that picture on the cover of my book is me running in Costa Rica. David Goggins is a pretty well-known badass, former Navy SEAL, just an amazing story himself. So he does this thing he calls the Goggins Challenge once every year, where he runs 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So I'm going to be undertaking that. I did that last year, really to talk about how, safe at home during COVID wasn't always safe at home for those living in abusive situations. This year, I'm doing the same thing starting Friday morning. I will be running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. And my hope is to have this conversation and also to raise funds for the Strathcona Shelter Society.
I love it. Well, I know that Real Talkers are going to be very interested and motivated to help you out on this. We've seen that every single time someone like yourself comes on this show and inspires our audience. And so people can find that link again through my Twitter. They can find you there as well. Mike, what can I say? I mean, you've opened up the door for us to have an incredibly valuable conversation here. And I would go so far as to say you've probably changed some people's lives today by making an impact on them directly, or inspiring and educating someone in their life who's heard your message, who's going to share your message and now take action. And on behalf of this audience that I care about very much, this community, thank you. And as a casual friend of yours, I'm very proud of you.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that.
You got it. Mike Cameron, what an unbelievable story that is. I encourage you to support him as you can. His Goggins Challenge for a Safe Place fundraiser starts on Friday, 48 hours. This is a guy that walks the walk. And Real Talkers, thank you. Thank you so much. Blake, by the way, says, I cry at the silliest things, TV shows, movies, 40 years old. It says I'm the exact same, Jespo. Yeah, that from Blake. My wife, Carrie, if we're watching, it's like The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is this great dog movie. Sam, have you seen it, by the way?
I have not. Please tell me about it.
Well, the dog featured in the movie is a dead ringer for yours. It's a doppelganger for your dog. So you're going to have to brace yourself emotionally even more.
Yeah, she's still pretty new to my family. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
Yeah, well, I would recommend, pop some popcorn or whatever your thing is. Get the family together, watch the movie. It's actually just a fabulous movie. But I'm the type, when we watch a movie or a show that's going to, like Grey's Anatomy, I don't even really care about Grey's Anatomy. As a matter of fact, I always scoff at it. Carrie says, let's watch Grey's. I say, Grey's is so unrealistic. There's like this ridiculous, there's like a tsunami or like a mass shooting or a huge explosion that happens every single episode. I'm like, everybody would leave Seattle if this was an accurate description of what life in Seattle was like. But I digress. I'm always the guy with tears in his eyes watching Grey's Anatomy. I don't care. Come at me, bro. I don't care. To me, it's like I was raised in a home where displays of emotion were welcomed and important. And I'm an emotional guy. My highs are high, my lows are low. That's me. And everybody's different. Everybody's wired differently. But I think getting that message out, especially to young people, and today we're talking about men, and we're talking about boys, and other days we'll talk about women, or we'll talk about society and people in general, including tomorrow from 9 to 10 a.m. Mountain Time. But I think it's such an important conversation to have, and I'm so grateful. Heavy D says, I think that's the best interview that Real Talk's done yet, which is great. Haas says, I cry watching American Idol. Amber says, cry, get it out. It's okay. I agree. Michelle says, when my boy, 17 years of age, cries, I just hug him, and I'm present for him. I don't try to fix it. I just hold space for him. That's beautiful, Michelle. Ryan says, I find myself crying at things I wouldn't imagine, especially after having kids. That's huge. If you're a parent, I don't even know if I should tell this. This is such a tragic friend of mine who's a firefighter. Should I tell? Yeah, I'm going to tell you. This is just so, a friend of mine, he shared with me that he had such a tough call. They responded to a call. This is just horrific. A father of a newborn baby was cradling in the rocking chair, was cradling the child, trying to get the child to sleep. And dad slumped over and suffocated the baby. And I'm going to start crying talking about this. So my buddy, they respond, right? Fire, ambulance, everything. Obviously, the child can't be saved. And the father is wrecked. Like wrecked. And my buddy told me, because he's a father of two, when they got back to the fire hall, he said it was like he'd never experienced before, because the guys on that pump, the guys on that truck are dads. And he told me at the time anyway that it was the most difficult call he's ever been to. And the debrief that they had to participate in, and you think of trauma and what we understand about trauma and how it can root itself if it's not properly addressed. And it just reiterated to me as he shared that. And I'm not the type to ask my pals that are in law enforcement or first response or in the Canadian military. A good friend of mine flies helicopters. I don't ask those stories. I don't ask for those details. But I do know that the tools and making these tools available for people to confront their grief and to be able to talk about their feelings and to experience grief is so, so important. I feel like we go through things together as this. This is such a special community. I know I keep saying this. I feel like we're experiencing things. I don't even know what to say. This is absolutely amazing. I love you guys. Jackie says, I made the mistake of watching The Art of Racing in the Rain while I was on a flight back from Mexico, and says I had internalized sobbing through the entire movie. Lisa says, I experienced watching and crying at a movie with a man for the first time with my new partner, and it was a beautiful experience. That from Lisa. And because we could use a lighter moment, Scott says, all right, Scott's throwing this in. Everybody's taking a break, I think, from raisins and pineapple on pizza. Scott says popcorn could be a good discussion for this live chat. Do you pop it in the hot air popper or in butter in a pot? And I might throw in microwave popcorn as well. We could get that debate going.
I have like a cabinet popcorn machine. So
you're one of these
it's actually like an oil popper setup. But even when I make stovetop popcorn, it's just my go-to for quick, easy popcorn is a pot on the stove with a little bit of oil in it. Nice and simple. I also like dressing it differently. I love putting like chili powder and a little bit of sugar on popcorn. It's really delicious instead of the butter and salt. So yeah, you can kind of mess with it a little bit differently when you make it fresh like that.
I just checked the clock for the first time in ages, and we're encroaching upon the first ever 3-hour edition of Real Talk, which actually means I'm pretty sure, based on our license, that we're about to lose our live audio stream on Mixlr.
It is good for 3 hours a day.
So we get 3 hours a day live streaming on Mixlr. Did you know, by the way, that Mixlr is a great way to access Real Talk if you're on the road? We've had some people chime in and say, what's the best way to stream audio if we want to listen to the show live? Download the Mixlr app, and you can find us there, and you can also link to it right off our homepage. It gives you an alert
as soon as we go live.
RyanJesperson.com. That's a great thing, the alert, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a perfect thing.
It's my check to make sure that we are live. Is it comes up on my phone after we go live.
Checks and balances, baby. Checks and balances. The team at Eden Landscaping wants to remind you that a backyard kitchen can be part of your reality with nothing more than a phone call or a visit to landscapeedmonton.ca. They're the experts on patios and decks and gazebos and greenhouses and intricate brickwork and fencing and paving stone walkways. And are you starting to imagine these things like I am right now? Are you starting to look out into your own property and say, boy, would a gazebo ever look beautiful there? What about one of those swim spas that everybody wants? The team at Eden Landscaping has been doing this for 2 decades, and they're the best at what they do. Check them out online and tell them Jespo sent you. We also wanted to remind you that the team at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge right now is your go-to, not only for the best selection of Ram 1500 half-tons in the entire province of Alberta, but also that 2021 Jeep lineup that everybody's talking about. They've got the Rubicon Wranglers and the Gladiators that everybody's, oh man, those Gladiators are so very cool. The Grand Cherokee now in a 7-passenger edition, the fuel-efficient Compass, and then, of course, that Grand Wagoneer that's coming out in just a little bit. You'll find the best selection at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. Our thanks to the teams at DQ at Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. You thinking about a date night? When's the last time you were able to drop $5 and impress your date? I'll tell you, you can do it at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park at their 2 for $5 treat night. Every night after 8 o'clock for $5, you can mix and match any 2 medium dipped cones or sundaes. That's right, 2 for $5 treat night after 8 p.m. every night at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And our reminder that the team at Local Waste is gearing up, like the rest of us are, for Trash Talk. That's coming up on Friday. We want to know what you need to get off your chest. Blow off a little steam. You can send us the emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Local Waste loves to talk trash. As a matter of fact, they've been doing it for a quarter century, giving you a better, more local, family-owned and operated alternative to those big faceless international garbage corporations. So whether it's a tiny ma and pa shop or whether you're running a hotel, the team at Local Waste wants your business, and you can find them at localwaste.ca. As mentioned, tomorrow we're going to get into psychedelics. I mean, maybe not, well, although that's an idea, Sam. Hey? That's an idea.
You want to actually get into psychedelics?
Well, I was thinking if we're going to tell the audience we're going to get into psychedelics, then maybe we should get into psychedelics.
It'd be a new experience for me. Do you trust me driving this ship with that going on?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll just keep it to myself and you can guess whether or not I did or not. But in all seriousness, we're going to learn about ayahuasca and psilocybin and how it fits into mental health. Plus, Chief Alan Adam joins to talk to us about downstream impacts of resource mining, coming up on a Thursday edition of Real Talk.